Chapter 140. Fong Beibei ran away with a mischievous smile and then ran back. She reached out to Poplar Fruit for the wooden bucket. "Let me help you carry it," Poplar Fruit said with concern. "No need. I can carry it myself. Besides, I have to put it away later." Fong Beibei grabbed the wooden bucket from Poplar Fruit's hand without any explanation. Lin Xingshan interrupted. "Right, Brother Yang, if you want to raise a dog, what kind of dog do you want to adopt?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, "I don't know much about dog breeds. I only know about Tibetan Mastiffs and Huskies. But I don't have any special preferences for dog breeds. It depends on Kiki's opinion. As long as she likes it, I have no opinion at all." Lin Xingshan said with a look of disbelief. "She's just a kid. Why would she choose?" "No, as long as she likes it, it's fine," Poplar Fruit replied. "If she likes everything she sees, what will you do?" Lin Xingshan smiled again. "No," Fong Beibei said first. "Kiki won't be like this. I think she's quite smart." Kiki was praised. As a father, Poplar Fruit was honored. He was a little embarrassed and smiled. Fong Beibei gently rolled her eyes at him and said, "Weird uncle, I'm not talking about you. Look at how proud you are. You guys wait for a while. I will put the bucket away first, and then I will take you to the kennel behind." Fong Beibei left the sentence and trotted all the way with the bucket. She opened the right side door and walked in. "Is there a kennel behind?" Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. Yeah. Lin Xingshan didn't know how to talk when she was alone with Poplar Fruit in the room. "Are you all volunteers here?" Poplar Fruit tried to find a topic to talk about. He didn't want the situation to become too awkward. At this point, Poplar Fruit couldn't help but add, "It means to do volunteer work." After that, Poplar Fruit laughed out loud. His laughter was a little loud, and some of the dogs were so scared that they stopped eating. They shrank back and barked at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit quickly stopped laughing and looked around in embarrassment. "You're mocking me again." Lin Xingshan made 3 characters with her right hand. They dangled above her head and slid down like 3 black lines. However, this joke eased the atmosphere between the two, and Lin Xingshan was no longer so nervous. "Yeah, we're all here to volunteer," Lin Xingshan said. "Do you often volunteer here?" Poplar Fruit asked. "I'm quite familiar with Fong Beibei." "No, this is my first time here," Lin Xingshan explained. "The school requires 40 volunteer hours per semester. I haven't done enough yet, so I asked Beibei to bring me here to volunteer." "Oh, I see. I just graduated not long ago, and the school has already set a quota for volunteer work. It's really becoming more and more bureaucratic." Yang sighed and said, "Forcing others to do what they're willing to do, the word willing has changed." "No, it's not our school's fault. Many schools are already like this." Lin Xingshan defended Higashiyama University. "I heard that it's a policy issued by the central government. It's not their fault. There was no solution to this problem, and it was useless to say more." Poplar Fruit didn't continue talking about this issue. "What about Fong Beibei?" Poplar Fruit asked. "Her? She's already done her volunteer hours," Lin Xingshan said without hesitation. She looked at Poplar Fruit's expression and realized that she had answered incorrectly. She then said, "Oh, you mean here? Beibei often comes here. As long as she doesn't have any other plans on the weekends, she'll come over to help. I heard that she has been working here for more than 4 years." Lin Xingshan suddenly threw out a piece of information. "What, more than 4 years?" Fong Beibei, who had taken off her straw hat, just walked in. She didn't hear the conversation between Lin Xingshan and Poplar Fruit. "That's right. You've been volunteering here for more than 4 years." Lin Xingshan laughed. Fong Beibei poked Lin Xingshan's waist with her finger and whispered, "Don't talk nonsense." "I'm not talking nonsense. It's obviously true." Lin Xingshan joked with her and said, "Annie Lu and the others said so." "No, I rarely came here during the college entrance examination," Fong Beibei said. "For years." Poplar Fruit felt a little incredulous. If that's the case, didn't Fong Beibei already start helping here in the 3rd year of junior high? She could serve these dogs for so long. Poplar Fruit felt that as a man, he couldn't do it. Just how much love did one have to be able to do these things that no one knew about for 4 years every day? Poplar Fruit couldn't help but look at Fong Beibei. In a trance, he seemed to see a heart of gold. "Let's go to the kennels inside and have a look," Fong Bebe said. "Aren't there a lot of dogs outside?" Poplar Fruit was like a curious baby and asked, "Why don't you look outside?" Fong Bebe patiently explained to him, "The dogs outside haven't been injected with rabies seedlings. Some of them have just been sent here and need us to take care of them for a while. If you want to raise a dog, we suggest you choose from inside first." It turned out that the stray dog rescue station cooperated with the epidemic prevention station. Every once in a while, the epidemic prevention station would send people to give the dogs a physical examination and rabies vaccination. These were all free of charge. They were doing some good things for society. However, the people in the epidemic prevention station were not free every day. They usually waited for a week or two before coming once. So, except for some dogs that were seriously injured, they would not come to the door at any time. Generally, the dogs that had been injected would be kept in the kennels at the back, which were larger and easier to manage. "Oh, I see. Let's go to the back and have a look." Poplar Fruit smiled. Pushing open the side door on the right, Poplar Fruit and the others filed in. Lin Xingshan and Fong Bebe walked in front, and Poplar Fruit followed behind. Behind the side door was a long corridor. There was a relatively large but simple bathroom in the corridor. That should be the place where Fong Bebe had just washed her hands and put the wooden bucket. The corridor had a corner, and Poplar Fruit followed Fong Bebe and the others. He couldn't help but look at Fong Bebe from the side. He looked at her hair, which had grown a lot more beautiful than last time. He looked at her delicate neck, looked at her crystal white earlobes, and watched her ears slowly turn from white to red. Poplar Fruit realized that his peeping had been discovered by Fong Bebe. Poplar Fruit felt that his cheeks were burning, and he was a little embarrassed. He withdrew his gaze and remained silent. A woman's sixth sense was so strong. How could she not feel it? However, Fong Bebe pretended not to know. However, she said in her heart, "What a weird uncle." Chapter 141. The kennel at the back was really big. Just like a warehouse, it would take a few minutes to walk around the inside of the kennel. There were large fans on the wall that were spinning quickly. They might be a bit old, as they kept making zap, 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 zap sounds, but the ventilation effect was great. There was a row of glass windows on each wall, and the sunlight came in through the windows and spread over the kennel, making it look less dark and depressing. After walking in, Poplar Fruit found that the floor of the kennel was clean, and the traces of washing on it had not completely dried. "Bebe, did you come to wash it just now?" Lin Xingshan asked curiously. "Yes, the weather is good today, so I could do some cleaning," Fong Bebe said with a smile. There was an old man in the kennel who was taking out the dog mats from each kennel one by one, and then replacing the clean dog mats according to the number. "Uncle Duh," Fong Bebe said crisply. The old man looked at Poplar Fruit and the others, smiled at them, nodded, and then left with the cart full of dog mats. "Don't mind him," Fong Bebe explained to Poplar Fruit. "Uncle Da doesn't like to talk much, but he is a very nice person." "Is he the old man Zhang Guanda that was mentioned on the internet?" Poplar Fruit asked curiously. "Yes, we all call him Uncle Da," Fong Bebe said with a nod. Zhang Guanda was the owner of this shelter. Poplar Fruit had seen his introduction on the internet. This old man loved dogs as much as his life when he was young, and after retiring from work 5 years ago, he and his wife came to the outskirts of the city to build this shelter. In the past 5 years, he had helped countless stray dogs. Poplar Fruit thought of his hunched back and could not help but respect him. "So you cleaned the entire kennel by yourself?" Poplar Fruit asked in surprise. Fong Bebe replied a little embarrassedly. "Yes, Uncle Diz old, and there are no volunteers coming today." Like a tour guide, Fong Bebe took Poplar Fruit and the others to see the kennel. In the middle of the large kennel, there was an open space with some simple facilities, probably for the dogs to move around. There was a row of kennels neatly arranged along the 4 walls. The kennel was designed from top to bottom. The lower level was slightly smaller, estimated to be less than 1 meter high, and was reserved for smaller dogs. The upper floor was very big. Not only was it big, but it was also wider. Big dogs like the Samoyed, the Great White Bear, and the German Shepherd lived there. Poplar Fruit looked at the kennels one by one and realized that there were many different breeds of dogs. There were common dogs in the countryside, and there were also expensive pet dogs. This Chihuahua was probably worth a few thousand RMB. That's a teddy bear. Fong Bebe rolled her eyes at Poplar Fruit and corrected him. Ah! Poplar Fruit was speechless. He really knew nothing about the breeds of dogs. Except for the Husky and the Samoyed, which were very popular on the internet, he couldn't even name the other dogs. A poodle like a teddy bear was very small, just like a Chihuahua. He couldn't tell the difference at all. Now he was exposed. He braced himself, ignored his slip of the tongue, and said, "Isn't a teddy bear very expensive? Why would its owner be willing to abandon it?" Fong Bebe was silent. She opened the cage door and gently carried the teddy bear out. Poplar Fruit noticed that the teddy bear's two hind legs were broken, and it was dragging weakly behind it. It could only struggle with its front legs. It was very scared when it saw a stranger, and it didn't even dare to bark twice. Poplar Fruit could still feel its small body trembling. In Fong Bebe's arms, the teddy bear was gently comforted by her, and it slowly calmed down. "This teddy bear is so pitiful." Lin Xingshan's eyes were red. She said fiercely, "Its owner is too heartless. How could he have the heart to break its legs? He should be struck by lightning." Fong Bebe didn't speak. She comforted the teddy bear and put it back. However, Poplar Fruit still read a kind of sadness from her expression and read a kind of silent accusation. In this society, there was always a small group of people with brain problems. They were bullied in the company during the day, and they were blamed by their bosses and superiors. When they came back at night, they vented their anger on their dogs. They didn't treat their dogs as companions at all. They were just their punching bags, and they could beat them as they pleased. Some people even didn't treat their dogs as living creatures. There were several videos of rich second-generation students killing puppies and rabbits on the internet. They abused and mutilated their pets for fun, and they were already mentally deformed. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were mentally perverted. Poplar Fruit saw a lot of dogs that had suffered inhuman abuse in this kennel. The most distressing one was a big Samoyed, but except for its skeleton, there was no way to see how big it was. The hair that it was so proud of had been shaved off, and its body was covered in potholes and scars from cigarette butts. Even if it was carefully taken care of in the kennel, there was no way it could grow its fluffy and beautiful white hair again. Don't think that dogs don't understand beauty. This big Samoyed seemed to feel its ugliness, and was no longer willing to look up. When Poplar Fruit walked over, its head was facing the dark wall, motionless, and it exuded a depressed atmosphere. Poplar Fruit's heart was sad, and Kiki was also a little sad. She was held in her father's arms again. Although she was still looking around very actively, no one noticed that in Kiki's eyes there was also a little sadness and sadness. Fong Bebe walked in front, introducing the dogs here to Poplar Fruit and Lin Xingshan. From her narration, Yang Guo learned that almost every dog here had a sad past that they couldn't bear to look back on. They all had a sad past that they couldn't talk about. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Bebe's beautiful eyes, which seemed to be able to reflect people's souls, and his heart was full of emotions. Fong Bebe was able to tell the story of every dog here as if it was her family's treasure. It could be imagined how much time and care Fong Bebe had devoted to them. Not sure if it was because of the arrival of Fong Bebe or Kiki, but the appearance of Poplar Fruit and the others made the whole kennel boil. For a time, different sounds of dogs barking came one after another. Except for a few dogs that were not in good spirits, almost every dog was squatting at the door of the kennel, sticking out their tongues and wagging their tails at them through the fence. The most interesting one was the Bullhead Terrier. Wagging its tail was not a good choice for its short tail. Looking at it shaking, it looked like it had a cramp. "Look!" Lin Xingshan's sharp eyes were the first to notice, and she immediately shouted. Before her voice fell, she pulled Fong Bebe and laughed. Fong Bebe and Poplar Fruit also smiled, which diluted the melancholy atmosphere between them. As they walked, Fong Bebe suddenly stopped, looking hesitant and struggling. She hesitated and said, "Originally, I shouldn't interfere with your choice. It's not fair to the other dogs. Frowning slightly, Fong Bebe paused and then said, but there is a puppy that really needs someone to take care of it. She looked at Poplar Fruit's eyes and said softly, I'm just giving you a suggestion. How do you decide? I hope you won't be influenced by my words. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Bebe's awkward expression. He didn't know why, but he always felt a little anxious. He couldn't help but say, It's okay. Take me to see it. Fong Bebe looked deeply at Poplar Fruit and took them straight to the depths of the kennel. There was a separate large cage, not under the small cage. However, Poplar Fruit didn't feel any movement in the cage. Fong Bebe moved aside so that Poplar Fruit could see the situation inside. This space was bigger than an ordinary kennel. The sunlight was slanted into the space, and half of the space was immersed in darkness. There was a huge golden retriever lying there quietly. It gave people a feeling of depression that was even stronger than the melancholy Samoyed. Poplar Fruit remembered that Fong Bebe just said puppy, but how was this golden retriever small? However, although the golden retriever looked very big, it gave people the feeling that it was a lamp that had run out of oil. It was skinny, and even a lot of its hair had fallen off. Poplar Fruit squatted down. It couldn't even lift its head. Its eyes were slightly open, and it bared its fangs, but it couldn't even make a low growl. Seeing its sunken eyes, it was obviously terminally ill. Poplar Fruit was very confused. Did Fong Bebe introduce me to this big golden retriever that is half buried in the soil? Poplar Fruit squatted down. Fong Bebe didn't see his expression and just quietly waited for Poplar Fruit to make a decision. Woo-woo. There seemed to be a puppy barking sound coming from the kennel. The sound was so faint that Yongwood didn't notice it for a while in this room full of dogs barking, until he heard a second sound. What was that? Poplar Fruit looked in the direction of the sound. At this time, he saw that in the deeper part of the kennel, in the shadowy place, there was a ball of meat wriggling. It was wriggling towards a shriveled RT on the big golden retriever's chest. You should be able to guess what was written on it. But after sucking hard, not much juice flowed out. It was so hungry that it whimpered and wriggled, biting another RT. Fong Bebe, with tears in her eyes, took a small stick and a small bowl of white juice from the side and squatted down. She reached into the cage. At this time, the big golden retriever had no strength to resist Fong Bebe's approach. It just continued to bare its fangs weakly. Fong Bebe used the small stick to drip a few drops of juice on the place where the little dog, who couldn't even open its eyes, was biting. It immediately felt it and sucked it clean. After repeating this many times, Fong Bebe finally fed it full. The little dog licked its mouth and then moved back into the big golden retriever's stomach with satisfaction. It lay down on its stomach and didn't move at all. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 142. Squatting on the left side of Poplar Fruit, Fong Bebe sadly told them the story of the big golden retriever, Mama Jean. It turned out that the big golden retriever was affectionately called Mama Jean by the people at the stray dog rescue station. Listening to Fong Bebe's story, Poplar Fruit seemed to recall the scene of that night. It was a dark and windy night. The cold wind was bleak, and the shadows of the trees were bleak. Mama Jean walked out of a small shop with the lights still on and trotted to the dark and empty street. With its big belly, it was able to eat a full meal with the help of the kind-hearted owner of the midnight snack stall. Perhaps this time, it would have enough energy to give birth to the dog baby that it had been pregnant for a long time. Mama Jean was very happy. Even when she crossed the road, her footsteps were shaky. This was the best day since she started to wander. Bang! Squeak! In the night sky, the sound was so harsh. Vroom! With the sound of the engine starting, the motorcycle that caused the accident fled, leaving only Mama Jean lying on the ground in a pool of blood. The owner of the supper stall came out and saw the tragic situation of Mama Jean. He was ready to deal with the funeral, but Mama Jean was still struggling. So, the kind shop owner sent Mama Jean to a stray dog rescue center not far away that very night. In the middle of the night, Uncle Do accompanied the veterinarian, who was awakened by knocking on the door to perform emergency treatment for Mama Jean. Even the veterinarian felt that Mama Jean was too seriously injured to survive. But she survived and saw the sun the next day. Although Mama Jean was barely alive, she persisted for 4 days, until yesterday, when she gave birth to the dog baby in her belly. Unfortunately, only one of the puppies survived. But it was lucky because in such a car accident, there was still a dog baby that survived. It was not a waste of Mama Jean's persistence. However, after giving birth to the dog baby, Mama Jean seemed to have exhausted almost all of her vitality and could no longer struggle. Today, he observed that Mama Jean's spirit was getting worse and worse. She could not eat anything at all. Uncle De fed her food, but later, the food flowed out of her mouth. It looks like it's going to die soon. If it goes, what will happen to the puppy in the future? Fong Bebe sobbed. Poplar Fruit felt uncomfortable when he heard that. He moved closer to take a closer look. At this moment, Kiki, who was in Poplar Fruit's arms, moved. She called out softly, "Hey." Perhaps it was just a meaningless tone, but it was like a string being plucked, causing ripples. Madame Jean opened her eyes a little more. Her already cloudy eyeballs moved a little as she looked at Chi-Chi. Her unfocused pupils started to focus a little. Somehow, Mama Jean managed to get up half of her body. She turned around and picked up the golden puppy with her mouth. She slowly moved to the door of the kennel and pushed it in the direction of Poplar Fruit. After doing this, she seemed to have used up all her strength. Her huge body fell to the ground, making a muffled sound as she hit the cage. The golden puppy seemed to have been woken up by the noise. It hummed and moved to the side of Mama Jean, but Mama Jean pushed it back again. Her half-open eyes looked at Poplar Fruit with a pleading look. Poplar Fruit was surprised. Was she asking him to take care of her puppy again? Huh? What should I say again? Poplar Fruit could not help but look at Kiki in his arms. As if they had telepathy, Kiki raised her head. Her pure and flawless eyes were shining as she looked at her father. After looking for a while, Kiki patted her father's arm. She pointed at the golden puppy that was sniffing around with its eyelids closed. She mumbled, "Daddy." "Yes, yes." Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment, then suddenly smiled. Although he came here, he never thought of adopting a puppy that had just been born. But didn't Kiki like it? What was so difficult about adopting it? Moreover, adopting this puppy would not only be a good deed, but it would also make Kiki and Fong Bebe happy. What reason did he have to say no? Looking at Mama Jin's pleading eyes, Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at her. Fong Bebe looked at Poplar Fruit expectantly. Poplar Fruit turned to Fong Bebe and smiled. "Bebe, since this puppy is so fated to be with Kiki, let's adopt it." "Really?" Fong Bebe stood up and covered her mouth with her hands. Her face was full of surprise. "Really?" Poplar Fruit said firmly. "It's not cooked." Lin Xingshan, who was easily amused by Poplar Fruit's last joke, laughed again. Fong Bebe also laughed softly, her eyes reflecting the smile. At noon, Mama Jean still could not hold on and closed her eyes forever. Poplar Fruit accompanied Fong Bebe and the people at the stray dog rescue station to hold a simple funeral for Mama Jean. Fortunately, he brought milk powder for Kiki, so Poplar Fruit was not in a hurry to go home. In the afternoon, under the care of another owner of the stray dog rescue station, Grandma Lu, Poplar Fruit began the adoption procedures. Fong Bebe read the details on behalf of Zhang Ziyan. If you're a caring local of Yangcheng and have plans to raise a dog recently, we welcome you to come to the rescue station to apply to adopt a stray dog. In order to give the dog a warm home, you must provide a copy of your ID card and a copy of your household register to show that you are a resident of the city and have a fixed address. "Did you bring it?" Fong Bebe asked Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit nodded. He had seen the requirements on the website before and had brought the required documents. In order to make it easier for you to walk the dog and for you to raise the dog with peace of mind, please give the dog a status and apply for a dog license for the dog. In order to cultivate a good dog training environment, please tie the dog with a leash when you walk it. Do not keep it in a pen, chain, or stray. Do not abuse the dog. Treat and take care of it when it is sick. Poplar Fruit had actually seen these requirements on the internet, but Fong Beibei was still worried and insisted on reading them again. Grandma Lu asked Fong Beibei to take photos of Poplar Fruit and the golden retriever puppy. This was to facilitate file management and prevent situations such as loss or abuse. In addition to signing the adoption contract, Poplar Fruit also paid a deposit of 200 yuan. This deposit was to prevent dog traffickers. After half a year, if the rescue station confirmed that Poplar Fruit and the dog got along well, the deposit would be returned. Of course, Poplar Fruit did not intend to ask for the deposit back. In order to show his love, he had donated 20,000 yuan at the rescue station this afternoon. After completing the procedures, Grandma Lu thanked Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit avoided her in fear. She smiled and said, of course. You adopted the puppy and donated to our rescue station. This is not only a show of love, but also a show of support for us. Chapter 143. However, since you have adopted the puppy, you must treat it well in the future. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask Beibei. Grandma Lu looked kindly at Fong Beibei and said, in the future, Beibei will represent our rescue station and visit you from time to time to see how you get along with the puppy. If she causes you any trouble, please forgive her. Fong Beibei will visit. How could it be trouble? Poplar Fruit couldn't be happier. He waved his hand and laughed. No, you're always welcome. Haha. Good. Grandma Lu smiled and patted Fong Beibei's hand, but looked kindly at Kiki in Poplar Fruit's arms and said to Poplar Fruit, nowadays, there aren't many kind young people like you. Beibei, I'm going back to the back. It's getting late. Don't work too late. Go back early. Grandma Lu smiled and said goodbye to Poplar Fruit and went back to the doghouse. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei blankly, not knowing what to do. Fong Beibei looked at him and smiled. Wait here for a while. Let's pack up and leave together. Okay. Do you need my help? Poplar Fruit said. No, you just take care of Kiki. Fong Beibei was very straightforward, holding Lin Xingshan's hand, and the two of them went to wash their hands and change their clothes. When they came out, Fong Beibei had already changed into a thick down jacket and a beige knitted scarf around her neck. She looked like a city beauty in winter, which made Poplar Fruit's eyes light up. Let's go, Fong Beibei said as she walked to Poplar Fruit's side and helped Poplar Fruit lift the small basket containing the golden retriever puppy. Where are we going? Poplar Fruit asked. Let's go back. Lin Xingshan giggled. Not yet. We need to go to the pet shop. Fong Beibei patted Lin Xingshan's hand and said, I'm going to take Uncle to buy some food for the puppy. How do you raise a newborn puppy? As they walked, Poplar Fruit asked, such a little thing should be different from what a big dog eats, right? Fong Beibei patiently taught him yes. Generally speaking, it's best for puppies to drink breast milk, just like babies. But Mother Jean has left, and you don't have any other bitches who have just given birth to puppies. So we have to find another way. When you don't have dog breast milk, you need to be careful not to feed it milk or yogurt directly. At this time, puppies' digestive ability is not good enough. That will cause a lot of adverse reactions, diarrhea, and even threaten their lives. Fong Beibei said. Poplar Fruit walked forward and listened quietly. He stood on the left side of Fong Beibei. Lin Xingshan held Fong Beibei's right hand, and the two of them walked together. They walked to the bus station and got on the only bus. Poplar Fruit followed Fong Beibei and got off at a stop. There's a pet shop here. Everyone says it's good, Fong Beibei said. When they found the shop, Poplar Fruit and the others walked in. It was a big shop and there were many kinds of pets inside. He had heard that people raised lizards before. Today he finally saw a pet lizard. There were even small pet pigs. Poplar Fruit felt that it was an eye-opener. Fong Beibei didn't bring Poplar Fruit here to pick a pet. They went straight to the point and walked to the shelf of pet products. A waiter came to greet them, but Fong Beibei smiled and refused. No, we can do it ourselves. Standing in front of the shelf, Fong Beibei picked up 2 bags of milk powder and said to Poplar Fruit, these are for young dogs. Both of them are good, but the brands are different. Then you decide. We'll take whichever you choose, Poplar Fruit said with a smile. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit helplessly and put one of the bags back. She said, then we'll buy this bag. The pet shop is more than $10 more expensive than online, but the quality of this shop is still guaranteed. I don't know which shop sells authentic ones online. If you want to buy one in the future, choose carefully online. Poplar Fruit raised his eyebrows and said, then we might as well buy a few more bags at once. It'll be enough for 2 or 3 weeks. Fong Beibei had to take 3 more bags of milk powder from the shelf and put them in Lin Xingshan's basket. She said, this is enough. In the future, the dog will not only eat milk powder, so I'll tell you in 2 weeks. And this. Fong Beibei picked it up and showed it to Poplar Fruit. It was a pacifier covered with a syringe. The puppy doesn't eat much each time. You can use this to feed it 2 milliliters each time. You have to feed it every 3 hours. Fong Beibei reminded, especially at night. Don't oversleep and starve the dog. Well, wasn't this the second Kiki? Poplar Fruit didn't seem to care. Kiki was so difficult to take care of, but he had been feeding it to this day. Could a dog be more difficult than Kiki? Poplar Fruit didn't believe it. Let me tell you, the feeding of a dog is completely different from that of a baby. Fong Beibei saw that Poplar Fruit was not so nervous and told him seriously, What's the difference? Poplar Fruit humbly asked for advice. You can't let it drink milk while lying down, because if it drinks milk like this, the position will cause it to vomit milk and choke on milk. Fong Beibei said, you have to pick up the puppy like this. Fong Beibei demonstrated in the air and said, let it lie down. Hold the puppy's chin with your left hand and let its head be slightly raised. Then squeeze some milk from the syringe and gently rub it near the puppy's mouth and nose with the pacifier. Poplar Fruit looked at Fong Beibei and was a little fascinated. Fong Beibei looked up and saw his expression. She asked helplessly, are you listening? Poplar Fruit woke up at this time. Fortunately, his memory was extraordinary. He immediately found the audio information in his mind, filtered and analyzed the key points, and said, yes, I'm listening. Use the pacifier and gently rub it near the puppy's mouth and nose. Then what? It turned out that he was listening. Fong Beibei thought that she had misunderstood Poplar Fruit. She was a little embarrassed and said, let it smell the milk. It's best to let the puppy take the initiative to eat. Note that when you push the needle, don't push it too fast. It should be intermittent. Don't feed it too fast, or the puppy will choke. If the puppy can't take the initiative to drink milk, then you can cut the pacifier short and leave a small section. Fong Beibei gestured and said, put the pacifier in from the side of the mouth, and then push the syringe slowly to feed it. The puppy should have a swallowing reflex. After feeding it milk, wipe the dirt on its mouth and chin with a warm, wet towel. As long as it can drink milk, the puppy can live well. Fong Beibei said, of course, you can't throw it outside in the cold wind. The puppy they were carrying was wrapped in a small cushion so that it wouldn't be too cold in the basket. Poplar Fruit certainly understood this. He smiled and nodded. Are we going to buy a nest for it? Poplar Fruit joked. I can't draw a circle with chalk and keep it there. Then you have to pick one yourself. Fong Beibei took Poplar Fruit to see a variety of dog nests. Buy this. It's a small house, a mansion. Lin Xingshan pointed to the tall dog nest and shouted happily. Lower your voice. Fong Beibei pulled Lin Xingshan. Kiki is asleep. Don't disturb her. It's okay. Is this dog nest good? Poplar Fruit said with a smile. He went forward and touched the dog nest made of wood. No. Fong Beibei rejected. Except for looking good, it's not useful at all. And the puppy is still so small. How can it use such a big dog nest? Fong Beibei thought for a moment and said, you can buy a better cotton pad now, and then use a big cardboard box to make a nest. Pay attention to the ventilation and keep the nest dry. This is enough. You don't have to buy a dog nest. So, the Golden Retriever's dog nest changed from a luxurious and high-quality dog nest to a simple and ugly handmade cardboard box. If the Golden Retriever could understand human language, it would definitely jump out and spit at Poplar Fruit. It would even say to him, be a man. Don't listen to a woman. Be a man. Don't listen to a woman's nonsense. After buying some miscellaneous things, Poplar Fruit went to pay the bill. Lin Xingshan and Fong Beibei carried the things and followed behind him. After leaving the pet shop, it was almost dinner time. Poplar Fruit treated Fong Beibei and the others to a small restaurant nearby for a meal. It had to be said that in the middle of winter, people wouldn't feel too cold if they ate something to warm themselves up. Although for Poplar Fruit, the cold was not scary. For Fong Bei and the others, when they had not eaten, they were really cold and shivering. On the way back, Poplar Fruit used the excuse that he had a lot of things to buy to stop them from taking the bus. If they took the bus back from there, they would have to take a big detour to the subway. Not only was it troublesome, but it was also unsafe. Poplar Fruit sat in the front seat and asked the taxi to send Fong Bei and the others back to school first. He did not let the driver leave until he saw them enter the school gate. When he left, Poplar Fruit's heart was filled with joy. Today was really a good day. He actually met Fong Bei again at that place. Was this fate? Most likely. Although he did not think so, Poplar Fruit began to secretly look forward to Fong Bei's visit in 3 days. At this moment, walking on the quiet school road, Lin Xingshan and Fong Bei were also talking about Poplar Fruit. Bei, don't you think that Poplar Fruit is very handsome? Lin Xingshan said. What's the use of being handsome? Can he be eaten? Fong Bei laughed and said, Apricot, could it be that you have feelings for him? Who was the one who kept saying that no one could catch your eye? Go, you are the one who has feelings for him. Lin Xingshan said angrily. I think that he is indeed handsome, and seems to be quite rich. Don't know why. When Lin Xingshan said that he was rich, Fong Bei suddenly became silent. She somewhat sadly walked forward. Lin Xingshan did not know. She said to herself, it's a pity. He already has a child, you say. Why are all the good men in the world taken? Right, Bei. Lin Xingshan shook her hand and said, actually, I think the two of you are quite compatible. What nonsense! Fong Bei pinched Lin Xingshan's arm and said, don't talk nonsense. By the way, have you noticed that today is actually Christmas Eve? Yes, Christmas Eve. Apricot, tonight, you will obediently give yourself to me. Huh? He? The girl's laughter gradually drifted away in the cold night sky. Chapter 144. This is a very good book, Poplar Fruit thought, as he closed the book with the blue of the sea as its cover. Just like what was painted on the cover, a man and a tiger were lying quietly on a small dinghy in a sea of sharks. The picture was so quiet that it was a little strange. It was so harmonious that it didn't make sense. This book was the same. A book full of nonsense could be used to describe the story told in this book. This book described a fantasy and absurd adventure story. A 16-year-old Indian boy and a Bengal tiger drifted together on the Pacific Ocean for 227 days before they were both reborn. Ridiculous. How could a man and a tiger coexist on a small boat with difficulty, moving freely? How could they survive on the vast Pacific Ocean for more than 200 days? What did they eat to survive for such a long time? And why didn't the Bengal tiger eat the Indian boy when it was hungry? These questions constantly challenged the reader's ability to accept. When Poplar Fruit began to read this book, he was quickly attracted to it. There were many chapters and stories that seemed to foreshadow the protagonist's future. These foreshadowing made the reader's heart itch and unable to stop. After returning from the rescue station, other than taking care of Kiki and the golden retriever, Poplar Fruit spent the whole day reading this book. He even left Kiki aside to play with her toys. The author's description of the scene and the creation of the atmosphere had reached the point of perfection. There was noise in the boat, the low moaning sound of machinery. I tripped and fell. I wasn't hurt. I got up. I held onto the railing and took 4 steps at a time to run down the stairwell. Just as I ran down one floor, I saw water. A lot of water. The water blocked my way. The water was like a noisy crowd coming up from below. It surged, rolled, and bubbled. The stairs disappeared into the dark water. I couldn't believe my eyes. What's with the water? Where did the water come from? I felt like I was nailed to the spot. My heart was filled with fear and doubt. I didn't know what to do next. My family is down there. No one had predicted that the ship would sink, but it seemed that only the protagonist had discovered it. It seemed that he was the only one who had to face such a disaster and the pain of losing his loved ones helplessly. The full text only described the scene in detail, but between the lines, one could clearly feel the protagonist's despair and confusion. Even though the atmosphere was oppressive, there were still some scenes that made people want to laugh out loud. I clearly heard the monkey's screams. Something was shaking the deck. A white-limbed aurochs, the Indian aurochs, suddenly burst out of the rain and rumbled past me. It was frightened and became enraged, unable to control itself. I looked at it stunned. Heavens, who let it out? There was actually a wild bull running wildly in a boat that was swaying in the wind and rain. How could people not find it absurd and funny? There was also the zebra that weighed more than 500 pounds and crashed into the lifeboat from the air. There were also many unbelievable but joyous scenes. All of these made the beginning of the disaster less depressing. Before lunch, Poplar Fruit saw the chapter where the protagonist found the Bengal tiger on the boat. This made Poplar Fruit lose his appetite. While he was eating, he was thinking about what measures the protagonist would take if he was faced with a lively tiger in such a predicament. After eating quickly, Poplar Fruit did not take a break and continued reading. The good news was that there was still a lot of material on the lifeboat, but the bad news was that the Bengal tiger had occupied the lifeboat and was eyeing him covetously. I picked up the rat and threw it at him. Now I can still remember the scene of the rat flying through the air, its claws and tail. Richard Parker? Parker opened his throat, and the squeaking rat disappeared into it, like a baseball disappearing into a catcher's glove. Its hairless tail disappeared into its mouth like a strand of spaghetti. It was another interesting and detailed description. Faced with a tiger, the protagonist had 6 plans in his mind to kill it, but in the end, he chose the 7th plan. In order to not face an enemy that was scarier than a tiger, the despairing loneliness, the protagonist decided to let it live. However, coexisting with a hungry tiger was not an easy task. Later on, the protagonist had to go through many twists and turns, and had to escape from the tiger's jaws several times before he successfully tamed the ferocious Bengal tiger. He did not even have to hide in the small raft, and he was able to coexist with the tiger on the lifeboat. This was a long, floating journey, and the protagonist had many incredible experiences. Among them, the one that left the deepest impression was the carnivorous island. The island was so beautiful that it was dazzling, and he did not want to leave it again. However, on this island that was entangled with seaweed and tree roots, there was a hair-raising truth. If the protagonist had not peeled the fruit that wrapped the human molar, he would never have realized that this was an island that would devour and digest all living things at night. These trees are carnivorous too, but the acid level is much lower. When the other parts of the island are bubbling, the trees are a safe place to spend the night. However, once a person dies and stops moving, the trees will slowly wrap the body, digest it, and filter the nutrients from the bones until the bones disappear. Finally, even the teeth will disappear. Drifting was even more despairing than Robinson Crusoe. However, the good thing was that the protagonist only drifted on the Pacific Ocean for more than 200 days, and most of these 200 days were spent fighting with the tiger. In the end, the protagonist was rescued. Although he was rescued, Poplar Fruit read the later chapters several times. The ending was too confusing. Poplar Fruit could not figure out whether the story described in the first 200 pages of the book was true, or the story fabricated by the PI and the few representatives sent by the companies in the country. However, this possibility might be the sublimation of the book. No matter what, even if the book was not a great literary work, the story would definitely be able to attract people. Yonggwa could even foresee how popular Li An's film would become in this day and age where the special effects of movies had reached their peak. Those who recommended the book were not only some famous media, but also many Chinese and foreign celebrities. Not to mention others, the President of the United States, Obama, gave a very high evaluation. The book was an elegant proof of God's existence, a perfect demonstration of the power of stories. Teacher Zhou Guoping, a famous author that Chinese people were more familiar with, also praised, "We need this story, of course, not to hide our bestial nature, but to have confidence in our humanity." But why? Why was it that such a wonderful book had such poor sales in the Chinese mainland? Flipping open the Chinese translation, Poplar Fruit had a sudden realization. It was not that the book was bad, but that the translation had cheated the book. From this point onwards, the following content is purely fabricated and has nothing to do with reality. The translation of this book could be used as a textbook example of what not to do. This was what Poplar Fruit said when he was in a meeting with Guan Yanin and the others. The translation could not be word for word, sentence for sentence. Such a translation did seem to convey the meaning of the original text to the readers. However, in reality, they were only translating the literal meaning of the original text. Using Nita's functional equivalence theory, they did not give the translated readers the same feeling as the original text readers. Simply put, they did not reach the standard of faith, expressiveness, and elegance. What was faith? The meaning did not deviate from the original text, which meant that the translation had to be accurate, not distorted, not omitted, and not arbitrarily added or subtracted meaning. However, as translators, they did not even understand the original text, so how could they fully translate the meaning of the original text? In the first volume, the author had laid down a lot of foreshadowing and spent a lot of effort to describe many metaphors. However, in the translation, Poplar Fruit only saw the plot laid out plainly, and there was no trace of thought-provoking. The first volume of the Chinese translation that Poplar Fruit saw was very plain, just like a running account. It was so plain that one would not be interested in reading the second volume after flipping through the first volume. From the perspective of the readers, Poplar Fruit felt that 40% of the readers would give up on the book because they felt bored, and the remaining half would give up on the idea of buying it because they did not know what was going on. No wonder this book sold so poorly despite being recommended by so many famous people. If it were him, this book would definitely not be so dull and boring. Poplar Fruit directly threw this trashy Chinese translation into the trash can. He wondered how he would read this book if he were the one translating it. After pondering for a while, he flipped through a few hundred words in his mind. From these few hundred words, he could see that the effect was a few hundred times better than the Chinese translation. This was not him boasting, but the actual effect was indeed so. Poplar Fruit still had a certain amount of confidence in his ability to appreciate books. After all, he was a well-read person. Finally, Poplar Fruit called Zheng Yujie. "It's this book. I'm confident." "Really?" Zheng Yujie said in surprise. "Can we also ride on Lian's coattails?" "Don't worry." Because of his confidence in his ability, Poplar Fruit said domineeringly, "This book is a good one. Even if Lian is not making a movie, I can still help you sell it." Zheng Yujie patted her sofa and laughed heartily. "Okay, I'll report it tomorrow." "Poplar Fruit, you said it. When the time comes, I'll ask you to translate it." "Don't stand me up," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "No problem. Actually, after reading this book, my hands are a little itchy now. I can't wait to start." "That won't do," Zheng Yujie said with a smile. "You have to wait for us to get the publishing rights of this book. Otherwise, won't your efforts be in vain?" "Then how long do we have to wait?" Poplar Fruit said with a little disappointment. Zheng Yujie hesitated for a moment and said, "After the Spring Festival, I'll try to get them to hurry up. After the Spring Festival, we'll fight side by side again." "Huh? Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to. Chapter 145. After they finished talking about business, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie's conversation finally began. "I heard that you have a puppy?" Zheng Yujie asked curiously. "Yeah? How did you know?" Poplar Fruit was surprised. He had just brought the puppy home yesterday. Zheng Yujie had already found out today. "Huh? Who told you to post the photo on Weibo?" "Of course, I know." Zheng Yujie laughed loudly. "You follow my Weibo?" Poplar Fruit asked. "I didn't know." In the past 2 months, too many people had followed Poplar Fruit, so many that he had to block the notifications of new followers. Zheng Yujie had never told him about it, so of course, he didn't know. I secretly followed it." "How did you know?" "So, you have to pay attention to your words in the future. Don't think that I don't know when you secretly scold me on the internet." Zheng Yujie said proudly. "Is there a function to secretly follow?" Poplar Fruit laughed and changed the topic. "Why didn't I find out?" No, don't change the topic. Zheng Yujie shouted. Then we have to quickly give Xinlong a suggestion. Maybe he'll accept it. Yangwu didn't know what was good for her and continued to talk nonsense. Don't change the topic, Zheng Yujie said angrily, slapping the sofa. Oh, then what topic were you talking about? Poplar Fruit asked. What topic? Zheng Yujie was so amused by Poplar Fruit's joke that she forgot what she wanted to say. Poplar Fruit laughed proudly. Zheng Yujie was also annoyed by him. She threw a pillow on the bed as if she wanted to kill this bad guy. She laughed and said, "Look at your nonsense. I forgot what I wanted to say." He talked about dogs. Poplar Fruit kindly reminded him. Yes, a dog. Didn't you post a photo yesterday saying that you raised a dog for Kiki? Zheng Yujie asked. I think it's a golden retriever, right? Yes, just born, Poplar Fruit said. You brought it back as soon as it was born? Zheng Yujie asked in surprise. Which pet shop is so reckless? The female dog has to take care of the puppy for a while. I didn't buy it from a pet store, Poplar Fruit said. I adopted it from a stray dog rescue center. It's like this. Poplar Fruit briefly told Zheng Yujie the story of the golden retriever and Mama Jean. So that's how it is. Then it's quite pitiful, Zheng Yujie said, lying on the sofa and twirling a thread exposed by the sofa cover. Zheng Yujie's personality was more straightforward and carefree. After listening to the story, she didn't show much sadness, unlike Fong Beibei and the others who cried yesterday. Actually, if you want to raise a dog for Kiki, you don't have to go to the rescue center, Zheng Yujie said. I have a friend here who is in this line. What kind of dog do you want? I can get it for you. She counted with her fingers and said, Samoyed, Chow Chow, St. Bernard sausage, and so on. Even if you want an authentic Tibetan Mastiff from the plateau, he can get it for you. Moreover, my friend's dogs all have pedigree certificates, and I guarantee that they are all excellent purebred dogs. No need to go through so much trouble. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, Thank you for your kindness, but I don't care about breed or pedigree when I raise a dog. As long as Kiki likes it, it's fine. This golden retriever puppy is quite fated to be with Kiki. Then you have to take it for more checkups, Zheng Yujie said worriedly. I'm afraid that it has fleas or some strange disease. I don't want it to touch Kiki. Don't worry, but it has already been checked at the rescue center, Poplar Fruit laughed. Before the adoption, the Stray Dog Rescue Center asked the veterinarian to do a comprehensive examination of the golden retriever puppy. Poplar Fruit was still very assured about this. And now, the golden retriever puppy couldn't even open its eyes. It was harmless to humans and animals, so Poplar Fruit was not worried. Zheng Yujie didn't want to discuss this issue anymore. She chatted for a while and suddenly said tentatively, Little Fruit, today is Christmas. Did you ask any cute girls out to play? Yes, it's Christmas. Poplar Fruit looked out of the window. The sky was not dark yet, and it was cold as usual. This year's Christmas had come quietly. If Zheng Yujie hadn't said so, it would probably have left quietly. For the past few years, he had spent Christmas with Lu Yunran. On Christmas Eve, they would go out to watch a movie or eat a big meal, and then walk slowly along the neon-dotted Pearl River. On Christmas Eve, the two would go to a quiet and elegant coffee shop, sweetly opening each other's gifts. This year, would there be someone else by her side? Poplar Fruit didn't know, but he should have come alone. Hey, why aren't you talking? The other side suddenly became quiet. Zheng Yujie thought that the line had been disconnected. Oh, nothing. Poplar Fruit recovered at this time. He smiled slightly and said, There are no cute girls. We can't spend Christmas Day like this, just stay at home. I see. Zheng Yujie carelessly ignored Poplar Fruit's inexplicable silence. She said regretfully, If I didn't have to work overtime this week, I would have flown over to play with you. You don't have to go through so much trouble. Poplar Fruit laughed. It's just a Western holiday. I don't think we have to celebrate it. Hey, aren't you an English student? This holiday is as important as the Spring Festival in the West. Can't you accept it? Zheng Yujie asked curiously. No, it's two different things. Poplar Fruit explained. First of all, it doesn't mean that English students have to celebrate Western holidays. Secondly, I didn't say that I don't accept it. I just feel that there's no need to celebrate a foreign holiday since I'm alone now. I should just relax. No matter what, Zheng Yujie felt that after chatting with Poplar Fruit, her heart calmed down a lot. At least she knew that he had no one by his side. In fact, she really wanted to fly over to accompany Poplar Fruit for this holiday, which in her opinion was quite important. She had even bought a gift. However, the managing editor stopped her at the crucial moment and told her that she had to work overtime for Christmas. Zheng Yujie could only give up. As Zheng Yujie's mother's best friend, although Pang Yu did not expose Zheng Yujie's matter, she had been paying attention to Zheng Yujie's every move. Zheng Yujie was booking a plane ticket and buying a gift when Christmas was approaching. How could that excitement escape her eyes? In order to prevent Zheng Yujie from falling deeper and deeper into an irreversible situation, Pang Yu could only find an excuse to keep Zheng Yujie in Beijing. Although Zheng Yujie kept muttering that Annie Pang was not loyal, Pang Yu could only insist on doing so. After chatting for a long time, Poplar Fruit was about to cook and bathe Kiki. Zheng Yujie reluctantly said, "That's it then. Merry Christmas." When Poplar Fruit's "Merry Christmas" came from the other side of the phone, Zheng Yujie happily put down the phone. Chapter 146. Today, Poplar Fruit was particularly active. He came back early from his morning exercise. He did not sit silently in front of the computer after breakfast, as he usually did. First, he tidied up the bedroom, living room, and every other room. He folded the quilt, put the cups, and put the books back on the bookshelf. Then, he cleaned the living room. There might be hair shavings hidden in the carpet, so he used the vacuum cleaner to clean every corner. Poplar Fruit also opened the door and windows of the living room. While ventilating, he used a wet towel to wipe the dining table, coffee table, and cabinets. Maybe the dishes on the dining table were not drained last night. There was a circle of white marks on the table. Poplar Fruit also wiped it a few times with a rag. Then he went to the kitchen. There was a lot of oil on the kitchen hood. Poplar Fruit wiped it again and again. Finally, Poplar Fruit found a dry rag to wipe the water that splashed out from the sink. After doing all this, Poplar Fruit sat down on the sofa in the living room with satisfaction. He looked at the room that became extraordinarily fresh and bright under the blowing of some cold wind. Why did he go through so much trouble? Because Fong Beibei was coming today. Poplar Fruit thought to himself, I have to perform better. I don't want Fong Beibei to think that I'm a decadent man. He felt that he wanted to show Fong Beibei that he could provide a good living environment for Goldie, and not for any other reason. Yes, that was definitely the case. After Kiki got up, Poplar Fruit fed her milk and cleaned up her diapers. He let her play in her amusement park. Poplar Fruit immediately washed the diapers that Kiki changed. He did not wash them at night, as usual, because there might be a strange smell in the toilet. Goldie, oh, right. Poplar Fruit gave the golden retriever such a name yesterday. If Kiki could think now, she did not know if she would be glad that Poplar Fruit had a flash of inspiration when he gave her a name. Otherwise, if Poplar Fruit gave her such a vulgar name, she really wanted to cry, but had no tears. Poplar Fruit walked through the dining room and passed by its little nest. Goldie might have felt the vibration of his footsteps. It hummed and raised its head from its dog cushion. Awake! Poplar Fruit squatted down and touched Goldie's little head. It still could not open its eyes. Eyelids drooping, it used its head to rub against Poplar Fruit's hand. Goldie opened its mouth and sniffed around. You want to drink milk, right? Poplar Fruit laughed. He stood up and went to the kitchen to take out Goldie's milk bottle. He took out some dog milk that had been prepared and warmed up. Poplar Fruit carried Goldie out and fed it according to the method that Fong Beibei taught him. Goldie had an advantage, and that was that it could eat a lot. This was not only reflected in its appetite. When Poplar Fruit fed it for the first time, it could suck out the milk by itself using the pacifier. There was no need for Poplar Fruit to do anything else. Daddy! Kiki sat on the carpet and played with her toys. When she looked up, she saw the golden retriever in her father's arms. She smiled and shouted, waving her hands. Yes, yes. Poplar Fruit had also fed Goldie. When he heard his daughter's call, he smiled and said, Wait a minute. I'll let Goldie play with you. He wiped Goldie's mouth and checked that there was no excrement on its body. He then carried Goldie over and gently placed it on the carpet beside Kiki. Goldie was put down. Based on its body's senses, it discovered that the surrounding environment had changed. It moved around restlessly and whimpered. Suddenly, a fleshy little hand reached over and pressed on its body. Giggle! Chi-Chi touched the gold and smiled happily. She even raised her head and looked at her father as if she was showing off. Poplar Fruit sat down on the sofa and looked at her with a smile. After Goldie was held down by Chi-Chi, it began to struggle and squirm. Kiki let go of it and then crawled over to lean against Goldie. She was not much bigger than Goldie. Goldie felt the warmth of Kiki's body. Its fear and anxiety slowly calmed down. It snuggled under Chi-Chi's body and stopped moving. Kiki also lay down beside Goldie. She reached out and touched Goldie's back and smiled sweetly. Click! A sound was heard. Kiki looked up at her father. Poplar Fruit was laughing and taking photos of her and Goldie with his iPhone. It was very boring. Kiki turned back to play with Goldie. Poplar Fruit's right thumb and index finger moved up and down on the phone screen. He had a satisfied smile on his face. This is the effect I want. He slightly adjusted the size of the photo and wrote a Weibo post. Fong Beibei had class and called to say that she could not come in the morning. She made an appointment with Poplar Fruit to come later in the afternoon. Then let her stay for dinner. Poplar Fruit was secretly delighted. He ran to the kitchen and opened the fridge. He looked at the ingredients inside and thought about what kind of dishes to cook tonight. He even went out at noon after Kiki fell asleep to buy a few seasonings. Waiting was a long and boring process. At around 3:30, Poplar Fruit sat in the living room and read a book. As he read, Fong Beibei's face popped up in his mind. He could not bear to continue reading. Feeling uneasy, he simply stood up and paced around the living room. Kiki, who was playing with herself in the amusement park, heard the sound and looked up in surprise. She tilted her head and looked at her father in confusion. Since it's like this, let's cook. Poplar Fruit clapped his hands and walked into the kitchen. He took out the pork belly from the fridge and separated the fat from the lean. Then he cut them into long, thin strips. Then he laid the meat strips on the chopping board and repeatedly chopped them with a kitchen knife until they were minced. Then he put them into a big bowl and mixed them well with cooking wine. The water chestnuts, that is, the water chestnuts, were also peeled and chopped. Then he poured them into the minced meat, added salt and starch, and kneaded them. That was not enough. Poplar Fruit put the meat in a fresh-keeping bag and patted it repeatedly. He smeared oil on the clay pot, washed the rice, and poured it in. Then he poured in a certain proportion of water and waited for it to slowly soak for a while. In addition to his signature pot rice, Poplar Fruit also prepared a pot of corn and radish pork rib soup. After blanching the cut pork ribs, he washed the meat and then added water to boil it with red dates. After the water boiled, the air was soon filled with a tempting meat fragrance. Woo-woo! Goldie's nose was very sharp. When it smelled the meat fragrance, it began to rub restlessly in its cardboard box. Poplar Fruit walked over, squatted down, and happily patted its little head. He said, Goldie, are you hungry again? But you can't eat meat right now. Don't worry. Follow Dad, and you'll have a good life. Huh. Poplar Fruit mixed milk for it to drink. After playing with it for about 10 minutes, he went back to cook the soup. Just as he poured the cut corn and radish into the soup, Poplar Fruit's phone on the coffee table rang. Kiki heard the theme song of City in the Sky. She happily raised her head and crawled in the direction of the coffee table. Coming, coming! Poplar Fruit was faster than Kiki. As soon as the voice fell, he saw Poplar Fruit rush out of the kitchen like a whirlwind. With a leap, he stepped over Kiki's amusement park of cardboard boxes. Then he bent down and grabbed his phone. At this time, he still had the apron on his body. Kiki was crawling when her father suddenly appeared. She was a little surprised. She froze in place, but her little head moved along with her father's figure. Un. Poplar Fruit walked back and forth while answering the phone. Okay, I'll be right there. After putting down the phone, Poplar Fruit bent down, put his face in front of Kiki, and said with a smile, Kiki, Annie Beibei is coming. Hearing this name, Kiki's eyes lit up. At this time, She was using both hands to support herself on the carpet. She couldn't wave her hands to express her feelings, but from her beaming face, it could be seen that she was very happy. Bebe. Suddenly, Kiki called out these two words. Poplar Fruit was stunned. He never taught Kiki how to say Fong Bebe's name, but Chi-Chi had learned it by herself just like that. She was really too smart. Although Poplar Fruit heard a lot of praises from others, he was still shocked by his daughter's genius performance time and time again. Father is going to pick up Annie Bebe. When she arrives later, you must say hello to her. Time was tight, so Poplar Fruit didn't say much to Kiki. He quickly took off the apron and hung it in the kitchen. Then he took his leather jacket from the bed, put it on, and zipped it up, preparing to leave. Ah! Kiki called out anxiously. Poplar Fruit stood at the door and stopped. He thought about it. He couldn't let Kiki be alone at home when she was awake. So he turned back and put the jacket on Kiki, then wrapped her in a blanket before carrying her out. Although it was afternoon, because it was the 12th lunar month, the air outside was very cold. It was said that it was snowing in the north again. The north wind whistled in Yangcheng, and the temperature dropped by a few degrees. If a person stayed outside for a long time, their hands and feet would feel cold, and their whole body would feel like it was frozen. Poplar Fruit only wore a home long-sleeved t-shirt under the leather jacket, and it wasn't the kind with flannel. He zipped up the leather jacket, but the cold wind still poured into his neck. Only the current Poplar Fruit, he couldn't do it in the past, was so unafraid of the cold. He had internal energy to protect his body, and it was like a warm current flowing through his meridians under his skin. His whole body was warm. After Poplar Fruit walked out, he became more and more anxious. When Fong Bebe called him, she had already arrived. The bus stop was on the street, and there was no cover at all. How cold was she standing there and being blown by the wind? As Yongwa thought about it, her footsteps quickened. When he was about to reach the bus stop, Poplar Fruit saw Fong Bebe leaning on the bus stop sign from afar. Her white clothes were very conspicuous against the dark green bus stop. Chapter 147. When he got closer, Poplar Fruit could see clearly. Fong Bebe didn't wear gloves or a hat. Instead, she wore a white down jacket and white trousers. He didn't know if she had long johns underneath, but these clothes weren't enough in such cold weather. Fong Bebe was rubbing her hands, stamping her feet, and shivering. She was leaning against the bus stop sign, but how could a bus stop block the pervasive cold wind? Seeing her face was purple from the wind, Poplar Fruit's heart tightened. Without saying a word, he unzipped his jacket. Although it was a bit troublesome to hold Kiki, he still took off his leather jacket. "Uncle!" Fong Bebe looked up and saw Poplar Fruit and called out in surprise. Seeing Poplar Fruit taking off his jacket, she quickly walked over and held Poplar Fruit's hand and said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? It's so cold." Poplar Fruit pulled his hand out of Fong Bebe's cold hands and said with a smile, "It's okay. I have thick skin." He took off his jacket and covered Fong Bebe's body with it. Poplar Fruit was much taller than Fong Bebe. His jacket was also very long. When it covered Fong Bebe's body, the hem hung down to her knees. "You're wearing so little." Fong Bebe saw Poplar Fruit only had a long-sleeved t-shirt left. She protested and wanted to put the jacket back to Poplar Fruit. "It's really not cold." Poplar Fruit pressed the jacket down without any explanation. Fong Bebe's shoulders and neck were wrapped. Only her head was exposed. With Poplar Fruit's jacket covering her body, Fong Bebe seemed to be finally isolated from the biting cold wind outside. She suddenly felt a lot warmer. There was no point in arguing. Instead, it would only make the two of them suffer in the wind for a few more minutes. Unable to dissuade Poplar Fruit, Fong Bebe stretched her arm out of her sleeve and pushed Poplar Fruit's arm. She said, "Let's go. Don't stand here and talk." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Okay, come with me." He led Fong Bebe back the way they came. From the bus stop, they still had to take 2 turns to reach the entrance of the residential area. "So it's here. I couldn't find it after looking for a long time," Fong Bebe said with a frown. "Didn't I tell you to tell me a few stops in advance to pick you up?" Poplar Fruit rebuked. They walked into the apartment building. Once they were past the curfew and out of the cold wind, it finally warmed up. Fong Bebe muttered and said, "I thought I could find the way by myself. That way, you wouldn't have to make another trip." Who knew? When I got off the bus, I couldn't find the way. There was no one on the road. I couldn't even ask for directions. Although you didn't have to make a turn, it's not a direct route. After getting off the bus, the road is so complicated. Poplar Fruit pressed the elevator button and nagged, "It's your first time here. You should have let me pick you up." "Okay," Fong Bebe said, "I know." The two of them walked into the elevator. At this time, Kiki heard Fong Bebe's voice. She struggled to stretch out her hand and head from the tight quilt. Poplar Fruit pressed her back. Kiki began to be unhappy. She sadly groaned and showed signs of crying. "Hey, why are you like this?" Fong Bebe saw and scolded. In the elevator, the temperature rose again. Fong Bebe took off Poplar Fruit's jacket and handed it to Poplar Fruit. Then, she reached out for Kiki. She hugged Kiki and pulled the quilt away. She deftly used one hand to wrap the quilt again. This time, after she folded it again, the small quilt was folded into the shape of clothes. Kiki's hand went through the gap of the quilt and then wrapped it again. Not only did it look good, it also did not affect her free movement. The shackles that made her feel uncomfortable had disappeared, and Chi-Chi smiled widely. She took the initiative to hug Fong Bebe's neck and kissed her on her face that was still a little cold. Being kissed, Fong Bebe was very happy. She held Kiki's little hand and smiled. "Good Kiki, stupid uncle. Good Kiki, stupid uncle." Poplar Fruit looked and was a little jealous. Every time, he had to put his face close to Kiki and coax her for a while before she was willing to kiss him. But facing Fong Bebe, Kiki was so proactive every time. This was too much of a blow to him as a father. "What you did just now was wrong," Fong Bebe explained. "You wrapped Kiki with the quilt like a dumpling, trapping her hands and feet. Her blood vessels were suppressed and unable to circulate. How could she feel comfortable?" Poplar Fruit readily accepted. He listened humbly and nodded like a chick pecking at rice. When they reached home, Poplar Fruit took out the key to open the door. Fong Bebe followed in. She looked around and asked curiously, "Uncle, is your wife not home?" Wife? Poplar Fruit had never heard this word in his life. Poplar Fruit did not react for a moment. He took off his shoes and asked subconsciously, "Your wife, Kiki's mother?" Fong Bebe said. Hearing this word, Kiki remembered that she could say it too. She clapped her hands and said happily, "Mother? No." Poplar Fruit touched his head and said, "Kiki doesn't have a mother, and I don't have a wife." "Ah?" Fong Bebe was confused. She covered Kiki's ears and whispered, "No way? You adopted Kiki?" Poplar Fruit was stunned for a moment. He quickly waved his hand and said, "No, Kiki is my daughter, my biological daughter." "Then how?" Fong Bebe was even more confused. "Who doesn't have a mother? It can't be that she popped out from a crack in a rock, right?" "It's a long story." Poplar Fruit was a little confused. When facing Fong Bebe, he did not know how to explain it to her. Kiki's biological mother died when she gave birth to her, but she really isn't my wife. "Actually, I'm not close to her," Poplar Fruit said. "That was a mistake, kind of like a one-night stand." When he said this word, Poplar Fruit wanted to slap himself. How could he say that? He was usually good at talking, and he specialized in dealing with words. How could he not know how to speak now? It wasn't a one-night stand. It was drunk. Poplar Fruit found that he was making things worse. Okay, you don't have to explain. I understand," Fong Bebe said. She added in her heart, "Isn't it just a game that rich people often play?" Abandoning the woman after playing with her. Fong Bebe frowned. Her heart was still wavering. "That's not right. I don't think Weird Uncle is such a bad person. He's usually quite nice. He's also very nice to the dogs and Kiki. Why would he do something like that? Could there be some misunderstanding? It shouldn't be a misunderstanding, right? Kiki's mother gave birth to his child, but he hasn't married her yet. That's not right. If it weren't for the fact that you're a responsible father, I wouldn't have bothered with Weird Uncle. You understand?" "What do you understand?" Poplar Fruit wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Forget it, there was no need to explain. He simply shut his mouth. Chapter 148. Fong Beibei, with Kiki in her arms, looked at the amusement park that Poplar Fruit decorated for her, and walked over with great interest. Poplar Fruit followed behind, lowered his head, and said, "Watch your step, you have to step over here." Sniffing, Fong Beibei, who was about to lift her right foot, retracted it. She turned her head and asked Poplar Fruit in confusion, "Uncle, are you cooking something?" Poplar Fruit nodded and said, "Yes, I am cooking soup." "With the fire on?" Fong Beibei asked. "Ah." Poplar Fruit felt a little bad. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "It's like this." Fong Beibei pushed him away and went straight to the kitchen. "Puppy lives here," Poplar Fruit shouted from behind when they passed by the dining room. But Fong Beibei ignored him, walked into the kitchen, and looked inside. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and had to bite the bullet and follow her in. "You left the fire here and ran out?" Fong Beibei turned her head and stared at Poplar Fruit and said angrily, "I thought that it wouldn't matter if I came up quickly." Poplar Fruit explained, "What if you couldn't find me and took a long time?" Fong Beibei scolded, "If the water dried up or boiled out and extinguished the fire, wouldn't it be dangerous?" Fong Beibei was right. It was indeed his fault. Poplar Fruit no longer quibbled and bowed his head to admit his mistake. In fact, the heater was on in the house, and Fong Beibei soon felt hot. She temporarily handed Kiki back to Poplar Fruit and took off her down jacket. She was wearing a tight sweater, and when she took off her jacket, her beautiful curves were exposed. Poplar Fruit's eyes were stuck on her like a magnet, and he could not take them off. Fong Beibei looked at him and said with a smile, "Uncle, do you want me to add the word strange again?" Poplar Fruit was a guest, so he led Fong Beibei to visit the house. There was nothing else to praise. No matter how clean and tidy it was, in the eyes of girls, it was still a bit messy. The only thing that made Fong Beibei stop and marvel was Poplar Fruit's study. Fong Beibei was taken aback by the bookshelves around her and the books on one side of the bookshelves that were already filled with books. "I couldn't tell. Uncle, you are a person who loves to read," Fong Beibei said in surprise. Poplar Fruit was indeed more fond of reading than before. Firstly, it was because he could gain much more from reading than before. His eidetic memory was not just for show. He could absorb the nutrients of the sea of knowledge like a sponge. The more he read, the more excited he became. Secondly, he had enough time to read. In the past, when he worked in a foreign trade company, he had no control over his time, and sometimes he had to socialize. When he returned to his residence, he felt physically and mentally exhausted. With such a tight life, how could he find time to read? It was already good enough that he could squeeze out some time to learn about his line of work. Now, because he had to take care of Kiki, he spent most of his time at home. When he was tired from translating, he could flip through books. This kind of life was too comfortable. Therefore, Poplar Fruit would buy some books online almost every few days. In less than a few months, his bookshelf was already full. After walking out, Fong Beibei took Kiki, sat down on the sofa, and asked, "Uncle, by the way, don't you have to go to work today?" "I don't have to go to work. I am a freelancer, and I usually translate for people." Poplar Fruit laughed. "Oh, no wonder there are so many language books on your bookshelf that I don't understand." Fong Beibei nodded and said, "You don't understand?" Poplar Fruit said doubtfully, "There are still a lot of words written in Chinese. My English is not good. Are you a fellow student? It seems to be very high class." Fong Beibei said. She was talking about the abbreviation of simultaneous interpretation. It means that without waiting for the speaker to pause, the interpreter can simultaneously translate the speaker's words to the audience. Simultaneous interpretation is almost the pinnacle of interpretation. Poplar Fruit had not tried this line of work. Of course, he felt that if he was asked to do it now, it should not be a problem. "No, I mainly do translation." Poplar Fruit shook his head and laughed. In the past, Poplar Fruit also considered doing simultaneous interpretation. The income of simultaneous interpretation was much higher than translation. It charged by the hour, and one could earn thousands to tens of thousands of yuan per hour. However, the problem was that they needed to go out frequently, and Yonghua had no choice. As a single father, and a father like Chi-Chi, who couldn't leave his side for even a moment, he could only give up on this option. Of course, if there was a chance in the future, Poplar Fruit would not necessarily do it. Because he was not short of money now, and his interest in translation was getting bigger and bigger. He was more willing to spend more time and effort on more creative work. That's amazing. How many books have you translated so far? Fong Beibei said admiringly. Ugh. Poplar Fruit was a little ashamed. He went to the study room and took out a copy of the biography of Steve Jobs. He handed it to Fong Beibei and said, "Not many, just one, and it's not even a complete book." Poplar Fruit felt that this book was translated with others, so it could not be considered as his translation. "It's this book. A few days ago, a few people in my class bought it." Fong Beibei flipped through it and said in surprise, "So it was you who translated it?" "Just this one," Poplar Fruit said embarrassedly. "That's still very good. You're still young," Fong Beibei said as she patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder like an old man. Kiki saw it, and she groped her way over. She copied Fong Beibei and patted her father's shoulder. Then she giggled and turned around to hug Fong Beibei's neck. Looking at the two people playing around, Poplar Fruit smiled helplessly. "You can translate such a thick book. That's amazing," Fong Beibei said. "My biggest headache right now is English." "Huh?" Poplar Fruit was a little puzzled. She said in frustration, "I don't even know how to do my CET 4 and CET 6 exams. When I took the entrance exam, I got the lowest score and was assigned to the first class." Poplar Fruit was an English major. He didn't take the entrance exam, but he still knew that Higashiyama University's entrance exam was still a little important. Because which class you were assigned to, it would determine the time to take the CET 4 and CET 6 exams. The third class was the fastest, and you could take the CET for exams directly in your freshman year. The first class was a little miserable, and you need to slowly learn from university English. Hearing her say this, Poplar Fruit asked puzzledly, "No way? Weren't you admitted in advance? Your grades should be very good." Poplar Fruit himself took the Higashiyama University's entrance exam when he was in high school, but he didn't pass the first round. "Who said that the early admission results are good?" Fong Beibei rolled her eyes at Poplar Fruit and said, "My grades are not good, and I'm very biased. My English is the worst." Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 149. Oh, Poplar Fruit understood. Then you were admitted in advance through the competition. Beibei. Kiki saw that Fong Beibei and her father were chatting happily, and neither of them was paying attention to her. She became anxious, and Kiki's little hands wrapped around Fong Beibei's neck. She put her mouth next to her ear and called out coquettishly. "Yes," Fong Beibei answered happily. She hugged Kiki in front of her and kissed her lovingly. She praised, "You know how to call me by my name. You're so smart." "Uncle, when did you teach her?" Fong Beibei asked. Poplar Fruit wanted to say that he taught her, but he felt that it would be too hypocritical. He told her honestly, "I didn't teach her. Maybe she heard too much and learned it herself." Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit in surprise, but did not say anything. Poplar Fruit did not know how ambiguous his words sounded in Fong Beibei's ears. If she learned it as she listened, then how many times must he have whispered Kiki's name in her ear every day? If Poplar Fruit knew, he would probably cry, but have no tears. He did not want to. Who asked his daughter to be so smart? She was almost a demon. Fong Beibei and Kiki were having fun. Poplar Fruit smiled, got up, and went to the kitchen. There were still a few steps to the soup. "I couldn't tell, but you're pretty good at it." Poplar Fruit was busy in the kitchen for a while. As he was cutting cucumbers, Fong Beibei's voice suddenly came from the door. Poplar Fruit turned around and saw Fong Beibei standing at the kitchen door with Kiki in her arms, looking at him with a smile. For some reason, looking at her smile, Poplar Fruit felt a rush of excitement. I'm alone at home. As I cook every day, my skills have been honed. Poplar Fruit laughed. After that, he turned around and continued to cook. Poplar Fruit said without turning his head, "By the way, aren't you here for a home visit today? Gold's nest is in the dining room. Do you see it?" "I see it," Fong Bebe said. "I saw it when I came in. I saw that it was sleeping soundly, so I didn't disturb it." Fong Bebe suddenly frowned and asked, "Jinzi? Who gave it this name? It's so unpleasant." I gave it a name." Poplar Fruit looked back at her with a little embarrassment. "Is it not good?" "It's not bad, it just feels too vulgar." Fong Bebe thought for a while and said, "Is it?" Poplar Fruit explained, "I think it's pretty good. Jinzi is originally a golden retriever. In the future, its fur will be golden. Also, it's called Jinzi because we think it's very precious and important to us." "If you say it like that, then it's fine," Fong Bebe said. "It's just that I feel that it has something to do with money." "Then can you help to give it a name?" Poplar Fruit laughed happily. Fong Bebe gave him a dirty look and said, "No, we have so many dogs. I've named it so many times. I'm getting tired of it." "Do you have a dog called Jinzi?" Poplar Fruit asked. "No." "Then let's call it Jinzi. It's so unique, right?" Poplar Fruit laughed. "It's probably the only one in the world." "How is that possible?" Fong Bebe said. "But it's okay to call it Jinzi the puppy. I think the more I call it, the better it sounds." "By the way, are you going to have dinner here tonight before going back?" Poplar Fruit laughed. No need to be so troublesome. I'll go back after sitting for a while." Fong Bebe quickly waved her hand and said. Poplar Fruit said, "It's not troublesome. Look, my vegetables are all washed here. It's no trouble. But it'll be too late to go back by then." Fong Bebe said, "It'll take an hour to go back by bus." "It's okay. I'll do it right away. It's not even 5 o'clock yet. Let's eat early, and then I'll send you to the bus. I promise it won't be too late." Poplar Fruit said, "But..." Fong Bebe was still a little hesitant. Seeing this, Poplar Fruit took out his trump card and said, "Kiki, quickly call Bebe. Ask Aunt Bebe to stay for dinner." Hearing her father's call, Kiki was very obedient. She called out crisply, "Bebe." Every time she called Bebe, she was very happy. It could be heard from the volume of her voice. Okay, I won't go." Fong Bebe's heart softened. She laughed and said, "But Kiki, don't listen to your father's nonsense. You should call Sister Bebe. Sister Bebe is not that old." Yes. You're young and beautiful, lively and lovely. 18 years old." Poplar Fruit flattered. "That's right, I'm 18 years old." Fong Bebe said proudly. Since Fong Bebe stayed for dinner, Poplar Fruit did not stay idle. He quickly began to cook the prepared steamed rice. He put the rice and water into the casserole and boiled it over a large fire. After more than 10 minutes, when the rice and water were boiled, small holes appeared on the surface. Poplar Fruit continued to cook the meat patty on the surface. After cooking for a while, he cracked 2 eggs and covered it with the lid. When the meat patty was about 80% cooked, Poplar Fruit turned off the fire and let it continue to simmer against the residual heat of the casserole. During the cooking process, Poplar Fruit did not stay idle. He tossed the oil pan to cook other dishes. Finally, he boiled a few small vegetables with hot water and took them out to drain. The sauce was the key to making steamed rice. The sauce was made with water, light soy sauce, fish sauce, soy sauce, salt, sugar, and other ingredients. It did not need too much, just a small bowl would be enough. After the steamed rice had been simmering for more than 10 minutes, Poplar Fruit opened the lid and added the boiled vegetables. Then, he evenly poured the sauce over them. As soon as the sauce was poured over, the aroma of the steamed rice immediately overflowed. Even the closed kitchen door could not hide it. Woo-woo! Goldie, who smelled the aroma in its sleep, began to kick its legs and cry out. Fong Bebe could not stop laughing. When the dishes were ready, Poplar Fruit placed them on the table one by one. At this time, his cell phone suddenly rang. It was a call from the express delivery. After hanging up the phone, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and said to Fong Beibei, Beibei, help me take care of Kiki at home. I'm going out to get the express delivery. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. He did not want to go out with Kiki in the quilt again. Moreover, he trusted Fong Beibei quite a lot. Okay, no problem. Fong Beibei smiled and said, Hey, put on your clothes. Poplar Fruit, who had just opened the door, turned around. Fong Beibei led him to the leather jacket hanging on the stool and threw it to him. Poplar Fruit took the jacket, smiled at her, and went out. Poplar Fruit arrived at the entrance of the neighborhood and realized that he had been tricked by the express delivery guy. He had not arrived yet. In the end, the express delivery guy made Poplar Fruit wait for almost 15 minutes. In fact, waiting was not a big deal. Poplar Fruit was just worried that if he left for too long, Kiki would go crazy. He had tried. From the moment Kiki was born until now. When she was awake, Kiki could not leave her father's side. Even her own mother could not. As long as she did not see her father, she would cry and make a fuss. Of course, the press conference was an exception. Kiki thought that the Poplar Fruit on the big screen was her father in real life. However, there was no big screen at home now. Moreover, Poplar Fruit did not bring his cell phone out. When he finally got the express delivery, Poplar Fruit, who was burning with anxiety, jogged all the way. He thought that when he reached the door, he would hear Kiki's heartbreaking cries. However, when he opened the door, Poplar Fruit did not hear anything. He only saw Fong Beibei at the dining table, acting coquettishly in Kiki's arms and having fun with Fong Beibei. You're back? You've been gone for so long. Fong Beibei smiled and said, What happened? Poplar Fruit asked in confusion. What do you mean what happened? Fong Beibei was confused by his question. Kiki, Poplar Fruit said, she didn't cry and make a fuss? No, she was fine the whole time. Fong Beibei smiled and said, That's not right. Poplar Fruit said, This was too strange. It was the first time that Kiki did not cry and make a fuss after being away from her father for so long. It was too illogical. It was like the sun that rose in the east and set in the west suddenly rose in the west. Seriously, isn't it a good thing that your child doesn't cry and make a fuss? Fong Beibei said, unhappily. Don't tell me you're hoping that Kiki will cry. You're underestimating me. Poplar Fruit explained, No, that's not what I meant. Kiki is like this. He spent a few minutes to explain Kiki's situation clearly. That's pretty good. Fong Beibei covered her mouth and laughed. This means that Kiki and I are very close. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, It seems like that's true. I feel that the two of you are too fated. Suddenly, Poplar Fruit thought of something that he was worried about before. Beibei. Poplar Fruit sat beside Beibei and said, Can you do me a favor? Poplar Fruit said hesitantly, What favor? Since Kiki likes to play with you so much, can you help me take care of her? Just for 2 days. Poplar Fruit said, Ah? Fong Beibei was a little confused. Do you have something urgent tomorrow? Not tomorrow. Poplar Fruit said, It's next week. Poplar Fruit explained in detail. It turned out that next Wednesday was the National Masters exam. Poplar Fruit had been hesitating about what to do. His original plan was to ask his godmother to help take care of him so that he could finish the exam earlier. But now, he had a better choice. Wow, you're going to take the postgraduate exam? Fong Beibei said in surprise. Yes, I'm going to take the postgraduate exam at our Higashiyama University. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. How about it? Can you help me? You don't have to come here. My exam is at the school. You can help me take care of it at the school. After the exam, I'll treat you to a meal. Even if you don't treat me to a meal, I'll help you. Fong Beibei rolled her eyes at him and said, We can be considered friends. Since we're friends, don't say such things. It's too vulgar. Poplar Fruit said apologetically, Okay. It's my fault. So, you agree? Yes. Isn't it just helping you take care of Kiki? I still want to play with her more. Fong Beibei used her finger to tease Kiki's little neck. Kiki's neck was itchy and shrunk back. Then she stretched out her little hand and wanted to grab Fong Beibei's finger. Fong Beibei suddenly pulled back her hand when she was about to grab Kiki's finger. But Kiki was not angry. She laughed happily. Ga, hee. All kinds of laughter could be heard. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 150. You want to take the postgraduate entrance exam? Why don't I see any postgraduate entrance exam books in your study? Fong Beibei asked doubtfully. She had seen many senior brothers and sisters who took the postgraduate entrance exam. They were all very diligent. They spent all day in the library or study room, doing one exercise book after another. I might be a little different from the others who took the postgraduate entrance exam. Poplar Fruit thought for a moment and explained, I could take the postgraduate entrance exam without reviewing a lot of things. These knowledge are usually memorized by heart. Only politics needs to be reviewed. I also reviewed that. The book was left in my hometown, and I didn't bring it back. Oh, I see. Fong Beibei didn't know much about the postgraduate entrance exam. She was only in the first semester of her undergraduate degree. How could she think so far ahead? Let's eat. Poplar Fruit got up, took off his coat, and hung it back in the bedroom. Then he said to Fong Beibei, Kiki, sit here. Poplar Fruit carried Kiki's baby seat out. Kiki was carried in so that Fong Beibei could wash her hands and eat. After washing the dishes, they drank the soup first. Poplar Fruit gave Fong Beibei a big bowl of pork ribs and corn soup. Fong Beibei said, okay. Don't eat too much. I can't eat any more. Poplar Fruit made 2 dishes and a soup today. It sounded a little small, but with a pot of rice, it was more than enough for 2 people to eat. Wow, Uncle, you are so good. The color, smell, and taste are perfect. Fong Beibei praised the dishes on the table while drinking the soup, especially the pot of rice. The green vegetables were dotted on the egg yolk and meat patty. It was fragrant and beautiful, making people drool. Eat. Poplar Fruit scooped a big bowl of pot of rice and gave it to Fong Beibei. He handed the chopsticks and smiled. Well, it's delicious. Fong Beibei said, you should eat too. Poplar Fruit took out a glass of warm milk from the kitchen. He fed it to Kiki and smiled at Fong Beibei. It was also time for Kiki to eat. He couldn't let Kiki watch them eat with an empty stomach. It's okay. You eat first. I'll be done soon. Poplar Fruit smiled. After feeding Kiki, Poplar Fruit went to the table to eat with Fong Beibei. By the way, you mentioned that you won a prize in a competition. What kind of competition was that? Poplar Fruit chatted with Fong Beibei while eating. Mathematics. Fong Beibei said, Mathematics? So powerful. What prize did you get? Poplar Fruit asked. Wait. Fong Beibei said with her mouth stuffed with food. So powerful. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He couldn't imagine that the beautiful girl in front of him had won the first prize in the National High School Mathematics League. Although he studied liberal arts, he was no stranger to this competition. When he was in high school, he had a good friend who studied this. Poplar Fruit saw his friend's problem book. It was completely beyond the scope of human beings. He couldn't understand the Fermat point, the principle of inclusivity and exclusion, and Chibushev's inequalities. The maze of formulas even made him doubt education. Was the mathematics they were learning the same subject as the mathematics he was learning? Poplar Fruit's good friend took the exam for 2 years. His best result was only the 3rd prize. His mathematics results were usually ranked 1st or 2nd in school. At least, during the 3 years that Poplar Fruit was in school, no one in his high school had won the 1st prize. But Fong Beibei won the 1st prize. Poplar Fruit didn't know how to describe his surprise. Actually, there was one thing that Fong Beibei didn't say. Not only did she win the 1st prize, but her competition results were also among the best in Guangdong province. Because of this, she was selected to participate in the Chinese Mathematical Olympiad and the National High School Mathematics Winter Camp. The participants of this winter camp were basically all admitted to the key universities. If Fong Beibei wasn't too biased in her subject and her results were too bad, she wouldn't have been admitted to Shuimu University and Beijing University. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fallen to the point where she could only go to Higashiyama University. Exaggeration. In the winter camp, Fong Beibei's results were also very good. In the final competition, she actually squeezed into the top 60 and was selected by the national training team. This was an amazing thing. Although it wasn't considered the national team, it was still a national team. Thinking about it, the annual training list of the National Olympic Team for football and basketball, everyone understood the value of this training team. It was a pity that Fong Beibei didn't make it to the end. Her results were far from the top 6, and the top 6 Olympiad geniuses were selected to represent the country in the International Mathematical Olympiad. Even if Fong Beibei didn't make it to the national team, she was still very good, at least in the field of mathematics. Even if Poplar Fruit became smarter, he still didn't dare to touch it. So, are you still studying mathematics? Poplar Fruit asked. Yes, mathematics and applied mathematics major, mainly in the field of mathematics. Fong Beibei smiled. Then what are you studying? Poplar Fruit asked curiously. What are the main courses? Now I'm still building the foundation, but I'm also slowly learning ordinary differential equations, complex variable functions, functional analysis, abstract algebra, differential geometry, and so on. Fong Beibei smiled. Poplar Fruit only felt that a few crows were flying in the sky. His eyes were rolling, but he didn't understand it all. Haha. Fong Beibei looked at him, put down her chopsticks, and laughed. You don't understand, right? Yes, yes. Yang sighed and nodded. She didn't know what he was talking about. What you guys are learning is too advanced. No, I think you're the amazing one, Fong Beibei said. Your English should have passed the 8th grade, but I'm still worried about English. I don't want to fail at the end of the semester, and if I can't pass the 4th or 6th grade, I won't be able to graduate in the future. Who told you that you can't graduate if you pass the 4th or 6th grade? Poplar Fruit smiled. Isn't that right? But it will also affect your postgraduate studies. Fong Beibei said. That's true. Poplar Fruit nodded and said, in fact, most people in Higashiyama University can pass the 6th grade before they graduate, so you don't have to worry. You don't know how bad my English is, Fong Beibei said unhappily. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and said, how about I tutor you in English? Fong Beibei was stunned and said, no, you don't have to. You're quite far from here, and it's not good to always trouble you. It's no trouble. You've already helped me look after Kiki, and if I tutor you, Kiki can often play with you. How good is that? She usually plays alone, so she's so lonely. Poplar Fruit said, I don't have to live here. When I'm a postgraduate student, I have to find a house near the school to go to school, so it's convenient. Poplar Fruit said, then it's settled. After I take the postgraduate entrance exam, I'll tutor you. I guarantee that you'll pass the 4th or 6th grade without any worries. Ha! Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 151. Poplar Fruit said that he wanted to tutor Fong Beibei. Fong Beibei didn't agree, but she didn't refuse either. Poplar Fruit didn't pursue it. Although he had the intention, he could only treat it as a joke. After all, the two of them weren't that close. After dinner, Fong Beibei helped Poplar Fruit change Kiki's diaper, while Poplar Fruit washed the dishes in the kitchen. Kiki wasn't so stable in Fong Beibei's hands. She kept moving around. She always thought that Fong Beibei was playing games with her. The laughter didn't stop until Poplar Fruit wiped his hands clean and Fong Beibei finished changing the diaper. Beibei! There! There! Kiki suddenly shouted in Fong Beibei's arms. Fong Beibei turned to look at Poplar Fruit in confusion. Poplar Fruit smiled and explained to her, Kiki wants you to take her to her toys. She wants to play with you. Poplar Fruit pointed in the direction that Kiki pointed, but Poplar Fruit picked up his phone to look at the time and said, it's getting late. I should send you back. Kiki, let's play next time. Kiki didn't understand what her father was saying. She saw that the two of them ignored her and showed signs of preparing to go out. She became anxious and cried, ahem, although there were no tears. The way she jumped in Fong Beibei's arms was torturous. Fong Beibei hesitated and said, let's play for a while more. She carried Kiki back to Kiki's amusement park. As soon as Kiki was put down, she immediately crawled to her pile of toys. She looked left and right, picked one up and put it down, picked one up and put it down again. It didn't seem like she wanted to continue playing. Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe were a little confused. They squatted by the side and watched. After squatting for a while, Poplar Fruit began to be distracted. Fong Bebe's hair wasn't very long, but when it was spread out, it looked dark and beautiful. It also exuded a faint fragrance. It definitely didn't smell like rouge perfume. Fong Bebe never put on makeup. Poplar Fruit could tell. It also didn't smell like shampoo because it wasn't outstanding, but it was faintly seductive. Poplar Fruit was a little distracted. He looked at Fong Bebe's beautiful ears from the corner of his eye, but he didn't dare to look more. He still remembered the experience of peeping at Fong Bebe at the stray dog rescue station a few days ago. At this time, Kiki finally found the one she was looking for from her pile of toys, a Barbie doll in a green dress. After finding the Barbie doll, Kiki turned around and stuffed it into Fong Bebe's hands. Then she sat there and laughed. Ah! Fong Bebe was a little surprised. She asked, "Kiki, did you give this to me?" Poplar Fruit, who had just recovered, was even more surprised. He knew that this Barbie doll was Kiki's most precious toy. Poplar Fruit still remembered that time when he went to the mall to buy clothes with Kiki. She took a fancy to this Barbie doll in a green dress at first glance, and then held it tightly and refused to let go. After they came back, Kiki could be said to have hugged it to eat, sleep, and wouldn't let her father touch it. So far, the situation had eased a little, but this Barbie doll was still Kiki's favorite toy. No other toy. She seems to want to give it to you. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said a little uncertainly, "But this toy is her favorite, so I'm not sure. Maybe she wants you to play with her." "Kiki, let's play." Fong Bebe happily sat down, handed the Barbie doll, and said, "Woo-woo." Kiki shook her head and pushed Fong Bebe's hand back. "Bebe." She tilted her head and thought for a while. She didn't know how to express herself, so she pointed at Fong Bebe and anxiously called out, "Maybe she wants to give it to you." Poplar Fruit said with some jealousy. It was another first. Kiki's first time giving something she liked to someone else. And it was actually not to her father, who loved her the most. Why did all the good things go to Fong Bebe? "Kiki, you're so nice." Fong Bebe was very touched as she hugged Kiki in front of her and kissed her little face. "Bebe Jijia likes it very much." "Thank you." Poplar Fruit, who was squatting at the side, clearly saw Fong Bebe's eyes filled with tears. Suddenly, that bit of conflict and unhappiness disappeared. Fong Bebe had to go back to school in the end. After all, she was still a student. Poplar Fruit handed over a small blanket and let Fong Bebe wrap Kiki up, then carried her over. After Fong Bebe put on her windbreaker, she carried Kiki over, somewhat reluctant to let go. Along the way, the night was as dark as ink, and the cold wind was bleak. Fong Bebe carried Kiki and walked in front with a smile, while Poplar Fruit followed behind with a smile, silently guarding. Looking at their happy faces, Poplar Fruit sighed and also had some nostalgia. Although he didn't understand it clearly, he still faintly wanted to continue walking on this road without an end. There was no end to the road, only a turn. After a turn, they were out of the community. Poplar Fruit naturally wouldn't let Fong Bebe take the bus back. It was freezing cold, and after getting off the bus, they still had to walk a long way. He didn't care about Fong Bebe's objection and stopped a taxi for her. After opening the door, Poplar Fruit estimated the price and gave the driver 100 yuan as the fare. However, money wasn't something that he was conflicted about. What he was conflicted about was saying goodbye at this time. Fong Bebe hugged Kiki tightly, kissed her cold little face, and said, "Kiki, Bebe Jijia is going back. Next time, Bebe Jijia will come and play with Kiki, okay?" Kiki didn't understand at all, but she faintly felt that something was wrong. She grabbed Fong Bebe's collar and hung on her body, unwilling to let go. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. If this went on, Fong Bebe wouldn't be able to go back tonight. He steeled his heart and carried Kiki back. He said to Fong Bebe, "Hurry up and go back first, or the dormitory will be closed. Call me." Fong Bebe nodded. She looked at Kiki and then looked at Poplar Fruit. She made a call gesture and closed the door. The taxi drove away and disappeared from Poplar Fruit in Kiki's eyes. Kiki was stunned for a long time before she realized that Fong Beibei had left. When Poplar Fruit carried her home, Kiki, who felt more and more upset, finally burst into tears. Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit didn't understand Kiki's thoughts. In Kiki's little heart, she liked Fong Beibei very much because she was usually alone and her father rarely played with her. Then, she wanted to give her favorite toy to Fong Beibei, and Fong Beibei would always play with her. But now, she gave her most precious thing, but Fong Beibei still left. She came back to her senses and felt heartbroken. Even if her father was still by her side, she felt wronged and could only cry to vent. Kiki was very simple, but she also had her own emotions. Often, when her emotions exploded, no one could persuade her. Not even her father. Afraid that Kiki's face would be frozen by the wind because of her tears, Poplar Fruit hurriedly carried her home. Fortunately, there was no one on the way. Otherwise, they would think that he had stolen someone's child. When they got home, Poplar Fruit tried everything, but there was no way to comfort Kiki. She cried so loudly that Poplar Fruit felt that it was deafening. If it weren't for the sound insulation of the house, the neighbors would have come over to complain. How long had it been since Kiki cried like this? Poplar Fruit couldn't tell. In the past, as long as her father coaxed her, Kiki would laugh through her tears. But this time, no matter what Poplar Fruit said, it was useless. Fong Beibei didn't take Kiki's Barbie doll with her. She knew that children were playful by nature and had bad memories. If she wanted to share her favorite thing with her now, she might forget it the next day. When that time came, she would look for the Barbie doll everywhere to play with. Wouldn't that bring trouble to Poplar Fruit? Poplar Fruit found the Barbie doll and brought it in front of Kiki. He wanted to use the Barbie doll to comfort her. In the end, Kiki stared at it for a while with her hazy eyes from crying. Suddenly, she threw it away and cried even harder. This time, Poplar Fruit was at his wit's end. Seeing his daughter cry so heart-wrenchingly, he was also very anxious. He wasn't in the mood to take a shower. He just hugged her and coaxed her. In the end, Kiki's voice was hoarse from crying. She cried until she was exhausted, but she didn't stop. Poplar Fruit was too anxious to see how long it lasted. However, Fong Beibei's call came in. "Uncle, I'm back at the dormitory." Fong Beibei was outside on the balcony as she called Poplar Fruit with a smile. "I still have to thank you for calling a taxi. It sent me directly downstairs." "It's okay. It's good that you're back safely." Poplar Fruit wasn't in the mood to respond to Fong Beibei. He looked at Kiki, who was still crying with heartache. Why do I hear crying?" Fong Beibei asked in confusion. Yes, Kiki was crying very hard. Poplar Fruit reluctantly pulled up the corner of his mouth and said, "She cried when you went back. She cried until now." Why did Kiki cry for so long?" Fong Beibei asked anxiously. "I guess she saw you go back and couldn't bear to cry." Poplar Fruit sighed. "Let me talk to Kiki," Fong Beibei said. "Put it on speaker." Poplar Fruit took the phone from his ear, pressed the speaker icon, and said, "Okay, you say it." Fong Beibei's voice soon came from the speaker. "Kiki, I'm Sister Beibei. Why are you crying again? You're not obedient when you cry." And Kiki cried and cried. When she heard Fong Beibei's voice, her crying stopped abruptly. Only a little sobbing sound was left. She turned her head and looked at the source of the sound. It was the phone that her father often held. "That's right, not crying like this is a good child." Fong Beibei laughed and said, "Kiki, call Beibei to Sister Beibei." Kiki didn't understand, but this time she was sure that it was Fong Beibei's voice. She excitedly shouted, "Beibei!" And then, "Kiki is so obedient." Fong Beibei laughed happily. "Yeah." Kiki looked at the phone and happily shouted. Although there were still sparkling tears on her eyelashes, the heavy smile made her beautiful big eyes curved into crescent moons. Chapter 152. Poplar Fruit smiled as he watched Kiki holding the phone and babbling to Fong Beibei nonstop. Kiki didn't understand what Fong Beibei was saying, and Fong Beibei didn't understand what Kiki meant, but the two of them chatted happily. It wasn't until Kiki was tired and slowly fell asleep listening to Fong Beibei's nursery rhymes on the phone that Poplar Fruit hung up the phone with Fong Beibei. Kiki stopped crying, and Poplar Fruit finally let out a sigh of relief. He wiped her tears and carried her back to the crib to sleep. Looking at the smile on Kiki's face, Poplar Fruit felt that Kiki must have dreamed of Fong Beibei. However, in Kiki's dream, was her father still with her? He didn't know. Of course, Poplar Fruit thought so. When he woke up the next day, Poplar Fruit was still looking after Kiki anxiously, worried that she would cry if she didn't see Fong Beibei. However, it was obvious that Poplar Fruit's worry was unnecessary. How could a child's brain remember so many things? After drinking the milk, Chi-Chi began to play happily in her amusement park again. This matter was considered over. However, there was still a side effect. This was something that Poplar Fruit discovered later. Kiki began to be interested in his phone. If the phone fell into Kiki's hands, she would look at it and press randomly, as if trying to find Fong Beibei. Even if Kiki saw it when he was on the phone, it would be terrible. She would immediately drop the toy in her hand, crawl to her father's side, and hug her father's ankle like a koala bear. Then, she would raise her head and look at her father with eager eyes. Beibei! Sometimes, she would simply stretch out her hand and call out, "It's not Beibei!" Poplar Fruit covered the microphone and said to Kiki, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. However, Kiki only understood the two words Beibei. She became more and more excited. She tugged at her father's trousers and kept shouting, "Beibei!" Poplar Fruit was so annoyed that he had to call Fong Beibei and let them have a good chat. Later, Poplar Fruit began to make phone calls while hiding from Kiki. Only then did things calm down. Winter was not a good time to go out. Other than working hard at home as a translator and earning more money, Poplar Fruit also began to study various kung fu manuals online. Poplar Fruit felt that his martial arts training was not completely useless after he had a real fight with someone at the bank. What was even more profound was that the internal Tai Chi that he practiced was so awesome. His whole body was like a loach. None of the opponent's punches and kicks landed on him. On the other hand, he relied on his internal strength to burst out his strength. Not only did he beat the opponent to the point where they couldn't fight back, but he could also smash the tiles on the floor of the bank lobby. However, he had been practicing Tai Chi for a long time. Many of the moves were memorized in his heart. He could even use them as a conditioned reflex. If he continued to practice, it would only be like this. After witnessing the ferocity of Muay Thai, Poplar Fruit's horizons were broadened a lot. Although Muay Thai was not as good as the internal Tai Chi that he practiced, its moves were not without merit. For example, Tai Chi focused on borrowing strength to fight strength. It pursued the weak to defeat the strong. However, this was based on the situation where the opponent was stronger than him. In fact, Poplar Fruit's strength was not weak at all. Borrowing the strength of others to fight back sometimes made him feel that his strength was useless. Muay Thai was different. Muay Thai pursued extreme speed and strength. Punches, kicks, knees, and elbows were very smooth. It was able to fully display the strength of the human body. The attack power and lethality were very good. This was exactly what Tai Chi did not have. Of course, it did not mean that Poplar Fruit had to practice Muay Thai just because Muay Thai was good. Muay Thai was a type of martial arts. It required one to improve through mutual attacks. It required one to train one's muscles and bones. This actually consumed a lot of one's vitality and vitality. Poplar Fruit would not practice Muay Thai. He was only interested in the moves of Muay Thai. For example, the stab kick, will kick, chain kick, and so on that he saw in the bank could be used as a reference for Poplar Fruit's own martial arts. Muay Thai was only a small direction. In fact, Poplar Fruit wanted to understand the various martial arts styles of China over the past 5,000 years. Chinese martial arts had a long history. In the words of the government, it was a precious cultural heritage accumulated and enriched by the working people of China over a long period of time. In fact, it was a variety of martial arts techniques that were slowly accumulated and formed in the long struggle against foreign enemies, against the government, and against thieves. If one were to talk about how many styles there were in Chinese martial arts, it was really uncountable. Tai Chi was also a small pebble in the long river of history. It was just that it withstood the elimination of time and was carried forward in the modern era, becoming widely known. Other than Shaolin, Wudong, Amei, Southern Fist, and other famous styles, there were also various small sects or martial arts passed down in families. Thanks to the popularity of various martial arts novels in the 20th century, more and more people paid attention to martial arts. However, the martial arts that they understood, or the martial arts that they saw on TV or silver screen, were not moves that were seriously used to kill enemies. Think about it. By the time you used these fancy moves, the enemy would have already beaten you to a pulp. What was the use of looking good? Poplar Fruit searched the internet for a long time before he found a few decent martial arts manuals among all kinds of flowery racks. Xingyi Quan, Wing Chun, and Drunken Quan, which was a combination of performance and actual combat. These martial arts were all famous, and their martial arts halls were not uncommon in big cities. It was not unusual for some of the moves to be spread on the internet. Poplar Fruit first began to study Xingyi Quan, which was as famous as Tai Chi Xing. Quan focused on short fights and straight attacks, which was the opposite of Tai Chi. However, Poplar Fruit was still very interested in it. Perhaps it could make up for the shortcomings of Tai Chi in close combat. Xingyi Quan used the 5 elements boxing: hack, collapse, drill, cannon, cross, and the 12 forms boxing: dragon, tiger, monkey, horse, chicken, hawk, swallow, snake, bird, eagle, bear, as the basic fist techniques. These were all teaching videos that could be found on the internet. It was not difficult to learn the moves of Xingyi Quan, but Xingyi Quan only had the shape and not the intent of the fist. The intent of the heart, the direction of the intent, is the fist. Without the intent, the fist would lose its direction and power. When Yang Guo learned Xingyi martial arts, she encountered a problem in this area. The martial arts manual said, hack fist has the intent of chopping things like an axe. Collapse fist has the intent of shooting things like an arrow. Tiger form has the courage of a fierce tiger pouncing on its prey. Snake form has the intent of flying on grass. However, no matter how much Poplar Fruit practiced, he could not find the feeling. In fact, Poplar Fruit could be considered to be a fast learner. Ever since he started learning Xingyi Quan, it had only been a few days, but he had already learned the moves. However, if he wanted to go further, he would have to rely on his own comprehension, or he would need the guidance of a master of Xingyi Quan. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 153. It was time to separate. Poplar Fruit looked at his watch. The exam would start in half an hour. He said goodbye to Fong Beibei and the others, but he looked back every 10 steps. He looked at Kiki in Fong Beibei's arms with some worry and reluctance until he walked out of sight. Fong Beibei, under the cover of her roommates, a few of them surrounded her, avoided the sharp eyes of the dormitory manager, and slipped upstairs. Walking up the stairs, Fong Beibei complained as she walked. How can you be like this? Isn't it just a small favor? It's nothing. Why are you making him spend so much money? How is it a small favor? He went to the exam, and you helped him take care of his child. This is a big favor, Lu Ruhua said, and we are actually helping you test him. That's right, to see if he is sincere to you. Lu Lei then added, if he is sincere, then he won't be reluctant to part with this small amount of money. Fong Beibei didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, what are you thinking? I have nothing to do with him. We have only met a few times. We're just friends. I can testify that you have known Poplar Fruit for a long time. The little spy, Lin Xingshan, raised her hand and laughed. Lu Ruhua said, I think he is quite interested in you. It is obvious that the way he looks at you is different from how he looks at us. I also think that you two are quite compatible when you stand together. Lu Lei laughed and said, one is a handsome guy, and the other is a beautiful girl. Don't talk nonsense. If others hear it, you can't even be friends with him. Fong Beibei frowned and said. At this time, Wu Yani, who had been silent, said faintly, even if he is a handsome guy, he has a child. Do you still want to push Beibei into the fire pit? Wu Yani usually didn't talk much, but she often hit the nail on the head. The lively atmosphere suddenly cooled down. Everyone was silent. It was Fong Beibei who broke the silence. She smiled and said, "Hey, you guys, why are you worrying so much? There's really nothing between me and him. Don't overcomplicate everything." Walking into the dormitory, Lu Ruhua sighed and said, "Why are all the good grass being eaten by other cows these days?" "That's because you're not a cow yet." Lu Lei giggled and ran up to Lu Ruhua. She grabbed the small mounds in front of Lu Ruhua's chest and said with a lewd smile. On the other hand, when Poplar Fruit arrived at the examination hall, most of the candidates had already entered. He took out his ID and admission ticket for the invigilator to verify before finding his seat. This was an old school building. The desks were very old and creaked when he sat down. Poplar Fruit took out a pen and placed it on the table. He looked around the examination room. The examinees all had grave expressions on their faces. Although the competition for the postgraduate examination was not as fierce as the college entrance examination, it was not easy either. Not everyone was like Poplar Fruit. They had been revising day and night for at least a year just for these 2 days. If they failed, they could only take the exam next year or not take the exam at all. The price of failure was too high for them. They could not relax at all. Preparing for the exam, Poplar Fruit turned off his phone and handed it to the podium. An invigilator kept it in an envelope and asked Poplar Fruit to write his name. After handing over the phone, Yonghua suddenly felt that her heart was empty, unable to reach the ground. Without his phone, it meant that he would not be able to receive any news about Kiki in these few hours. Poplar Fruit began to worry. He was worried that Kiki would cry in these few hours. If she cried, her voice would definitely be hoarse after 3 hours. He was worried that Kiki would scratch herself in the female dormitory. The female dormitory had a lot of small things and appliances, and Kiki was so active. He was worried that Fong Beibei would forget his instructions and not feed Kiki on time. It was 3 hours. What if Kiki was hungry? Why were the exam papers not given out yet? Poplar Fruit was anxious. He sat on the chair and twisted around, looking left and right. He was restless. His behavior quickly attracted the attention of the invigilators. They had pretended to walk past Poplar Fruit a few times and carefully observed Poplar Fruit's drawers and movements. Of course, they did not find any evidence of cheating. However, they still listed Poplar Fruit as a key target. Poplar Fruit was very young. He was only 23 or 24 years old. However, after a year of experience in society and having a daughter, his temperament was much more mature. Compared to other examinees of the same age, he looked more suspicious of cheating. After receiving the exam papers, Poplar Fruit's heart suddenly calmed down. He thought it through. Kiki had always been by his side, but that was not a problem. She needed to learn to face the situation when her father was not around. Moreover, since he had chosen to take the exam, he should not let his imagination run wild. He should focus on doing the questions and finish the exam early. It was more effective than sitting here and worrying. The first test in the morning was comprehensive English. The difficulty of the questions was similar to Poplar Fruit's CET 8 English major exam. However, for the current Poplar Fruit, it was really too easy. The complicated reading questions that others might find difficult or even pull their hair out were easily solved by Poplar Fruit as if they were eating a normal meal. He could basically see the answers to the choice, close, and reading comprehension questions at a glance. As for the translation and writing questions, Poplar Fruit only needed to ponder for a moment before he continued to write vigorously. During the whole process, Poplar Fruit's pen did not stop at all. It looked as if he knew the answers. The invigilator stood beside Poplar Fruit. He knew very well that Poplar Fruit could not copy the answers, but Poplar Fruit's performance in answering the questions really shocked him. The invigilator on the podium also noticed. He sighed in his heart and thought silently. Is he just going to randomly choose the questions? Why give up treatment? Poplar Fruit finished the exam papers that others might not be able to finish in 3 hours. Yonghua didn't even need to flip through the paper to check it again. He just closed his eyes and went through the answers in his memory. After correcting 2 mistakes, he began to put the pen cap back on and started to pack up. Under the astonished gazes of the audience, Poplar Fruit walked to the podium and handed in his paper. He then smiled at the invigilator and walked out with his phone. Poplar Fruit walked out of the examination hall and also received a lot of attention. The parents who were standing under the trees to avoid the cold wind pointed at Poplar Fruit and whispered, "Here comes another one." Yeah, even if you don't do well, don't give up halfway, the parents whispered bitterly. Before Poplar Fruit, someone ran out crying and shouting. It looked like he could not continue and had a mental breakdown. The parents felt that Poplar Fruit was in the same situation as the other examinee, just a little calmer. Poplar Fruit did not notice and did not care about other people's gazes. He picked up his phone and called Phong Bebe. Chapter 154. Phong Bebe couldn't believe her ears when she received Poplar Fruit's call. She looked at the time. It had only been less than an hour and a half. In addition to Phong Bebe's voice, Poplar Fruit also heard Kiki laughing happily for some reason. At this time, his hanging heart finally settled down. Phong Bebe was very dissatisfied with Poplar Fruit's worry. She didn't let Poplar Fruit come over. You don't even focus on the exam. Taking care of a child isn't like you. How can you follow her every day? As an adult, do you still have your own life? You have to know when to let go. You always say that Kiki loves to cry and throw tantrums after leaving you. But she's fine now. Why don't you let her try a day without you by her side? Phong Bebe lectured. Today, you have to take the exam properly. You're not allowed to call before 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., I'll bring Kiki back to you in one piece. Poplar Fruit stood on the road outside the exam hall. He stared blankly at the phone that had been hung up. He was motionless like a statue. The parents next to him saw this and sighed again. After being in a daze for a while, Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly and walked away. Since Phong Bebe said so, what else could he do? Moreover, hearing Kiki's voice and knowing that she was in a good condition, Poplar Fruit was relieved. Perhaps, like what Phong Bebe said, letting go at an appropriate time wasn't necessarily a bad thing. At noon, Poplar Fruit went to a hotel outside the school and booked 2 days of rest. Because the cheaper hostels and hotels had been booked early, Poplar Fruit could only choose the most expensive room, which cost 388 yuan a day. The second exam was foreign language. At this level, the French exam was as simple as elementary school English questions. Poplar Fruit finished his paper early and walked out of the exam hall. He was anxious, but he held it in. He sat on the stone chair next to the exam hall and waited until 5 p.m. Kiki was later carried down by Phong Bebe. She had a lot of fun today. She didn't sleep at noon and only fell asleep in the afternoon. When Poplar Fruit saw his daughter, she was still immersed in sweet dreams. Even her closed mouth revealed a trace of a smile. Poplar Fruit's feelings at this moment as he hugged his daughter. He was happy for his daughter because even without her father's company, she didn't cry and throw a tantrum. He was also relieved because his daughter had her arms around his neck for the past 8 months. And he was completely bound by his daughter. Sometimes when she hugged his neck, Poplar Fruit couldn't breathe, but Poplar Fruit was more disappointed. Poplar Fruit was used to being relied on and needed by his daughter. But his daughter didn't need him anymore. She didn't rely on him anymore. Poplar Fruit felt that his life was suddenly incomplete. It was just like when Lu Yinran left his life all of a sudden. A piece of his heart was missing. After bidding farewell to Phong Bebe, Poplar Fruit walked out of the school gate. He waited for Song Jiwen, who came to pick him up, to go home together. Kiki woke up in the car. She opened her eyes in a daze and felt her father's familiar heartbeat. Seeing her father's familiar face, a smile bloomed on Kiki's face again. Poplar Fruit only realized it when Kiki squeezed against his chest. He looked down and saw Kiki's little face rubbing against her father's thin clothes. She blinked her big eyes and looked at her father. Poplar Fruit suddenly felt relieved. What was there to be upset about? No matter who Kiki played with and how well she played, the person she loved the most would always be her father, right? The last subject of the postgraduate entrance examination was politics. Compared to the previous 3 subjects, which were effortless, this subject was a little crazy. Even though Yang Gua had read a lot of reference books, there were still some questions on this test paper that he had never heard of before. As long as Poplar Fruit had read the questions before, Poplar Fruit could easily choose the correct answer. However, reference books weren't omnipotent. The person who came up with the questions used knowledge that didn't appear in the reference books. What could he do if he didn't know how to do it? Poplar Fruit smiled. He chose C for all the multiple-choice questions that he didn't know how to do. Was there a need to repeatedly look at questions that he didn't understand at all? Poplar Fruit had such a cool attitude when answering questions when he was in school. There were also 2 subjective questions that Poplar Fruit didn't know how to answer. He didn't rack his brains to come up with some random answers, so he just left them blank. As for the questions that he didn't know how to answer, even if he got all of them wrong, he would only get around 20 marks, so he didn't care. Poplar Fruit spent a little more time on the politics test because he had to write more. However, he still handed in his test paper 1.5 hours early. He was still the anomaly in the examination hall that attracted a lot of attention. This time, Poplar Fruit still kept his promise and called Fong Beibei after 5 o'clock. He didn't tell Fong Beibei that he handed in his test paper early. If he did, he would still have to explain. It was too boring. Poplar Fruit promised to treat Fong Beibei and her roommates to dinner after the exam. When he called, Poplar Fruit also asked Fong Beibei to call her roommates down. "Where are you guys going to eat?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. "Senior, you can decide." This time, Lu Ruhua was a lot more reserved than yesterday. She didn't ask Poplar Fruit to give her money. "Why don't we go to Little North Gate to eat?" Fong Beibei suggested. Little North Gate was the most popular place for students to eat and drink. When Poplar Fruit was in school, he often went there to eat barbecue and drink beer with Song Ji-win and a few of his buddies. However, the quality of the food there was too low. Although Poplar Fruit understood that Fong Beibei was thinking about his wallet, he still wanted to find a better place. They were all students. If they went to such a high-end place, they probably wouldn't enjoy it. Poplar Fruit thought for a while and said, "Why don't we go to Sejinji restaurant?" Fong Beibei and the others didn't know where Poplar Fruit was talking about. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Just follow me." After they left the school gate, Poplar Fruit led them to another road across the street. It took them about 10 minutes to reach the place. This was actually a food stall, but it was more high-end than a food stall. The cost was high, and almost no students came here. When they were students, Poplar Fruit and Song Ji-win came here a few times. They were invited by their godfather. After eating, Poplar Fruit realized that such a deserted place hid a good place for foodies. No one greeted them. They found a seat and sat down. After a while, the only waiter in the restaurant brought over a teapot, a plastic bowl, and a menu. After putting down the things, he turned around and went to the back to serve the dishes. "Don't mind it." Poplar Fruit pointed at the pen and paper and smiled. "You have to write down what you want to order. It's like this here." When Lu Ruhua and the others looked at the menu, Poplar Fruit introduced, "This restaurant is more famous for pig stomach chicken. This is a must-order. The tofu is also very good. You can order what you want to eat." The girls thought about it and didn't want to eat pork with preserved vegetables. In the end, they ordered steamed scallops with garlic and vermicelli, fried pork with abalone mushrooms, double-cooked pork, and a plate of lettuce. Poplar Fruit handed the menu to Fong Beibei and said, "Beibei, you haven't ordered yet." Fong Beibei had just looked at the menu. The price of every dish on it made her click her tongue. She smiled and said, "No, it's already 6 dishes. I can't eat any more." Poplar Fruit knew what she meant, but he still ordered crispy fried fresh milk. He still wanted dessert. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Poplar Fruit chatted with them. Today, Fong Beibei's roommates didn't make fun of Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. However, the atmosphere wasn't very boring. Under the influence of the lively Lu Ruhua, several girls began to take turns to interrogate Poplar Fruit. "Senior, you haven't told us where you're from," Lin Xingshan asked boldly. "Why don't you guess?" Yang was smiled. Fong Beibei, who was sitting on his right, was playing with Kiki. When she heard Poplar Fruit's words, she raised her head and looked at Poplar Fruit. Lu Ruhua said first, "I guess you're also from the Northeast, but the accent doesn't sound like it." Lu Lei retorted, "It sounds like the accent is from Guangdong Province. How can there be such a tall boy in Guangdong Province?" Lu Ruhua said disdainfully, "Senior, you're almost 1.9 meters tall." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "No, I'm more than 8 meters tall." He was about 8 meters tall, so it wasn't wrong to say that he was 8 meters tall. "That's right, you're definitely from the Northeast," Lu Ruhua said happily. "Have you ever heard of a Northeastern person speaking Mandarin like that?" Lu Lei said, unwilling to give up. Poplar Fruit suddenly had a playful heart. He suddenly changed to the Beijing accent that he learned from Zheng Yujie and said, "Look at what you're saying. Does it mean that I'm from wherever I speak?" Lu Ruhua and the others were stunned when they heard this. With a smile, Poplar Fruit began to imitate Uncle Benshan. He spoke Mandarin very quickly, and Lu Ruhua didn't react at all. She didn't understand the first half, but Lu Ruhua understood the second half, and it was a very intimate local accent. She said excitedly, "I told you that Senior is from the Northeast. Look at how fluent he is in Mandarin." Wu Yani covered her forehead and didn't say anything. Fong Bebe laughed and said, "Ahua, don't you understand? Uncle is just messing around with you." Seeing that Lu Ruhua still didn't understand, Poplar Fruit changed to Hong Kong Mandarin again. He used all kinds of strange accents, and even pronounced "this is as Jie is," which made the girls laugh. This time, Lu Ruhua finally understood. She said in annoyance and amusement, "Can't we chat properly? Can't we still be friends?" In the end, she pulled Lu Lei's arm and said, "Lei, in the future, when you find a boyfriend, don't find a guy who speaks Mandarin like Senior. He's too cunning. Whenever you check on him, he can play several roles to deceive you." Poplar Fruit raised his hands and said, "Don't be like that. I was wrong. I didn't do it on purpose. We're not vegetarians, so don't bite us with the same brush. Okay, that's not right." With the Taiwanese accent, Poplar Fruit couldn't stop playing. "Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than or equal to." Chapter 155. The girls continued to question him. However, Poplar Fruit had experience in a foreign trade company, so this kind of small situation was not difficult for him. He played Tai Chi and pushed them away while asking about their background. In the end, before they could ask about Poplar Fruit had already found out about their depth. Fong Bei's roommates, Lu Ruhua and Wu Yani, were from other provinces. Lu Ruhua was from the Northeast. No wonder she was so tall. Wu Yani was from Shanghai. She was a little aloof and didn't talk much. However, Poplar Fruit felt that her coldness was different from Duan Xueqing. Duan Xueqing was cold and ignored all disturbances. However, Wu Yani's coldness was faked. She was a little like a proud swan, disdaining to talk to people she looked down on. Of course, she didn't show it, but Poplar Fruit was still keenly aware of it. Yanghua only smiled at this girl and didn't pay her any mind. Lin Xingshan and Lu Lei were both from Guangdong province. One was introverted, while the other wasn't. However, they could still chat a lot with people they were familiar with. Fong Bei didn't join in. She listened quietly at the side and occasionally said a few words when she was involved. Poplar Fruit didn't see anything from her face, but she seemed a little unhappy today. Fong Bei obviously didn't tell them about Poplar Fruit's work. Just when they wanted to ask about Poplar Fruit's work and income, Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "The dishes are served. Let's eat." The girls present didn't come from provinces that liked spicy food, so this table of Hakka dishes was more to their taste. Poplar Fruit was a person who was very particular about food. How could the food he recommended be bad? Soon, the girls started eating without caring about their image. The word praise wasn't enough to describe the deliciousness of the dishes on the table. The girls were so busy eating that they didn't even have time to talk. Towards the end of the meal, Lu Ruhua leaned back on the chair and rubbed her stomach as she lamented, "Today, I went over the limit again. I've gone on a diet for nothing this week." After paying the bill, the girls went to the bathroom, leaving only Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei sitting there. Fong Bei turned the teacup silently. Poplar Fruit hesitated and said, "Bei, if you have time, can you come to my house more often? Or ask you out to play?" Fong Bei raised his head and looked at Poplar Fruit. He panicked and added, "It's mainly because Kiki likes you a lot. Looking at Poplar Fruit's eyes that were as deep as the starry sky, Fong Bebe nodded softly. When they got home, Kiki fell asleep quickly. Poplar Fruit poured himself a cup of hot water and sat on the chair on the balcony, enjoying the cold wind and looking at the waning lights. He sat there for a long time and didn't drink the water even when it was cold. He wasn't thinking about anything, but his heart felt empty. Perhaps he had been lonely for too long. After the exams, Poplar Fruit threw himself into a new round of work and study. However, surprises always came unexpectedly. "Dad!" Kiki shouted at a high pitch and immediately woke Poplar Fruit up from the Swedish textbook in his hands. Poplar Fruit put down the book and walked to Kiki's side. He squatted down and asked, "What's wrong?" That. Kiki opened her mouth wide and smiled, revealing 3 jade-like teeth, 2 at the bottom and 1 at the top. It was very beautiful. Of course, Kiki wasn't referring to her teeth. Poplar Fruit followed Kiki's hand and looked over. Goldie was lying there quietly, looking up at the sky. There was nothing? Poplar Fruit was a little puzzled. No, Goldie's eyes. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood why Kiki was so excited. It turned out that, after more than 10 days in the Yang family, Goldie finally opened its eyes. Goldie didn't seem to be able to see clearly. Its eyes were a little confused. Poplar Fruit felt that when it raised its head, it might have felt his movement. During this period of time, if Kiki and Goldie were awake, Poplar Fruit would carry Goldie to Kiki's side to play with Kiki. Kiki's weight was about the same as Goldie's now. Poplar Fruit wasn't worried that either of them would hurt the other. Kiki, of course, liked Goldie a lot. Although Goldie couldn't see and didn't understand human language, Kiki wasn't speaking human language now. She would often hug Goldie's body and babble. Sometimes Kiki would even sing to Goldie. The songs that Poplar Fruit often played for her, Kiki could even hum the melody. Although Kiki's melody would often be broken or mixed when she sang, Kiki's performance was already very amazing. Goldie also liked the feeling of being by Kiki's side. As a puppy that had just been born, Goldie treated Kiki's warm body as someone it could rely on. If Kiki turned around to look for other toys, Goldie would hurriedly look around for Kiki's traces and then squeeze its way to Kiki's side. This time, when Goldie opened its eyes, Kiki, who had been playing with it, was the first to notice. She was probably wondering why her little friend didn't have eyes before. This discovery made Kiki very happy, so Kiki excitedly shared this news with her father. Taking out his phone, Poplar Fruit looked for information in this area and found that although the puppy opened its eyes, it still couldn't see anything. Poplar Fruit carefully observed its eyes, and at the moment, there seemed to be a layer of mist on the surface of its eyes, and it was misty. But this was normal. After a few days, the layer of mist in Goldie's eyes would disappear by itself, and then it would be able to see. Poplar Fruit touched Kiki's little head and gave her an approving smile. Goldie opened its eyes, and Poplar Fruit decided to post on Weibo. He opened the camera function on his phone, and in order not to stimulate Goldie's not fully developed eyes, Poplar Fruit turned off the flash, found an angle with sunlight, and took a photo. In the photo, Kiki was also not willing to be left out, and she broke into the camera, smiling happily with her head raised. Poplar Fruit smiled at her and said, "Don't worry, I won't forget your contribution." After posting on Weibo, Poplar Fruit thought for a while, then found Fong Bebe's QQ and sent the photo to her. As soon as he put down his phone, Fong Bebe called. Goldie opened its eyes? Fong Bebe said in surprise, "Don't tell me you opened it." "No, you said not to let me open it, and I always remember." Poplar Fruit complained. This time, it was Kiki who found it. Poplar Fruit explained. It just opened its eyes, and it can't see anything clearly. Of course it can't see, Fong Bebe said. She told Poplar Fruit a lot of things to pay attention to on the phone, such as not to stimulate it with strong light, and to increase the amount of milk to supplement nutrition, and Poplar Fruit listened patiently. "Let me talk to Kiki for a while." In the end, Fong Bebe asked Poplar Fruit to turn on the phone's volume, and handed it to Kiki. Looking at Kiki and Fong Bebe happily chatting, Poplar Fruit was inexplicably envious. When he called Fong Beibei, she didn't chat with him, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Please use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 156. When they were in school, society was like a roller coaster in an amusement park. It was full of excitement, and they yearned to step into society as soon as possible to explore and adventure. But once they entered society, they would slowly start to miss the time in school. Back then, it was just you and me. It was an ivory tower world with only books and love. Time was gone, and no matter how much they missed it, they couldn't return to the past unless they became the main character of a rebirth novel. However, after getting used to the deceit of society, people would think of their old classmates, those who used to talk about life without any worries or scruples. And so, the party began. On Wednesday, Poplar Fruit received a call from his class monitor, Luo Feiyue, asking him to come out on Saturday night for a gathering. This gathering was mainly for his classmates who were still working in Yangcheng. Of course, because there weren't many people in his class, he also invited his juniors who had just graduated this year. When his classmates in Yangcheng had just graduated, they would gather once every month or two. Later on, it gradually became less frequent. This time, it was almost a year ago, and Poplar Fruit cherished it very much. So, he readily agreed. The location of the gathering was a hot pot restaurant. It was less than 2 streets away from where Poplar Fruit used to live. The reason why the class monitor didn't choose a hotel was because he considered everyone's spending power. They were all people who had worked for less than 2 years, and the price of the hot pot restaurant was just right. At most, each person would pay 100 yuan. The class monitor planned to pay for the rest. On Saturday, because Song Chunfong needed a car, Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen stopped a taxi. They picked up Duan Xueqing and went to the gathering together. When they arrived at the destination, the class monitor, Luo Feiyue, and Duan Xueqing's class monitor, Zhou Guanglan, were already waiting at the door. Poplar Fruit looked through the taxi window and saw Luo Feiyue and Zhou Guanglan standing together. Their bodies were pressed together, and they looked like a newlywed couple welcoming their wedding guests. I heard that old Luo hooked up with Guanglan. Song Jiwen turned his head from the front seat and smiled slyly. So that's how it is. No wonder the gathering required 2 grades to be together. Poplar Fruit was suddenly enlightened. Poplar Fruit and the others got out of the car. Luo Feiyue and Zhou Guanglan immediately greeted them. Jiwen, Luo Feiyue gave Song Jiwen a big hug. Zhou Guanglan also affectionately held Duan Xueqing's hand. The 2 girls chatted softly on the side. Although they hadn't seen each other for a year, Luo Feiyue didn't recognize Poplar Fruit at first glance. After he carefully looked at him, he said in disbelief, "Poplar Fruit? It's you, kid? How did you become so tall and handsome?" Furthermore, Luo Feiyue's eyes widened as if he had discovered a new continent. He pointed at Kiki and Poplar Fruit's arms and asked, "What's going on here?" Song Jiwen interrupted Poplar Fruit and laughed. "What do you think? You didn't expect this, did you? This is Poplar Fruit's daughter." "It can't be." Luo Feiyue looked at Poplar Fruit in shock and nodded with a smile. He turned sideways and secretly pointed at Duan Xueqing, who came with Poplar Fruit, and asked in a low voice, "It can't be." No, it can't be." Poplar Fruit froze for a moment and denied it with a smile. Then, "That girl surnamed Lu?" Luo Feiyue had seen Poplar Fruit and Lu Yunran together when they were in school. "No," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "This won't do. It's too fast, too fast." Poplar Fruit, "Brat, you better be prepared to confess later. Let's see which beauty has trapped our handsome brother." Luo Feiyue laughed. Because of Kiki's unexpected appearance, Luo Feiyue had forgotten the fact that Poplar Fruit had become taller and more handsome. He and Zhou Guanglan asked Poplar Fruit and the others to go to the private room first. There were still a few people who hadn't arrived, so they had to wait. I remember that old Luo went to a real estate company. It seems that he has made a lot of money in the past 2 years. Poplar Fruit said as he walked inside with Song Jiwen. Song Jiwen said with a smile. I heard that he's doing well. It seems that he has his own sales team. Did you see his watch? I didn't notice. What brand is it? Poplar Fruit asked. You don't pay attention to fashion. Song Jiwen criticized. Whether a man has money or taste depends on his watch and his belt. His watch is a Swiss Longines, at least 10,000 yuan. That's really good. I think his whole temperament is very good. He's more straightforward and heroic than before. Poplar Fruit laughed. He had a good eye for people, but generally, he judged them based on their temperament. First, he was not familiar with those fashionable brands. Second, he felt that whether a person had money or background, it was not necessarily reflected in his clothes. Take the old man Ardal, for example. His clothes were all handmade, and he didn't even have a brand on them. His mobile phone was even a Nokia phone. Who could tell that he was a wealthy designer? Poplar Fruit and Song Jiwen walked in front, and Duan Xueqing quietly followed behind. The three of them walked into the private room together. There were already more than 10 classmates in the room. Although some of them were from different grades, they were all direct students. There was still a lot of communication between the two classes. Now that they were mingling together, they didn't feel strange or awkward. Poplar Fruit and the others were also warmly welcomed by everyone. Of course, the one who received the most attention was still Kiki. Kiki was not as lively today. She quietly nestled in her father's arms, only occasionally smiling at everyone. This was not the first time. Poplar Fruit certainly understood the reason. Kiki was about to grow another tooth. Her gums were itchy and uncomfortable, but she was still smiling. That was already a lot of face. Everyone gradually took their seats. Poplar Fruit sat next to Song Jiwen, and Duan Xueqing quietly sat on the left side of Poplar Fruit. She didn't sit with her peers in the same grade. Speaking of which, Duan Xueqing's roommate and best friend, Ma Yonghong, actually worked in Yangcheng. However, unfortunately, she was temporarily sent on a business trip by the company the day before yesterday. This time, she couldn't make it. That's not fair. All of you are handsome and beautiful. Hurry up and give one to me. A classmate joked. That's right. A group of people blindly jeered. You all came? At this time, the door of the private room was pushed open. A man in a slim suit walked in. Liang Zhenglin. You brat, you came late. Duan Xueqing and the others in the same grade laughed. Poplar Fruit knew this man called Liang Zhenglin. He heard that his family owned a company. He was a rich second generation. He was generous and often treated his classmates to meals. Therefore, he was quite popular. Since the beginning of the first year, he chased after Duan Xueqing. Poplar Fruit once helped Duan Xueqing to be a shield, but the effect wasn't very good. This guy was the type to pester. However, although he was pestering, he wasn't a loyal person. He also hooked up with other women. On the surface, he said that he was single. In fact, he didn't know how many girlfriends he had changed. Compared to him, Song Jiwen was many times better. Song Jiwen was an open and above-board lover, or former lover. This guy was a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was hypocritical. Seeing him appear, Poplar Fruit and Duan Xueqing both frowned. The moment he entered, Liang Zhenglin also saw Duan Xueqing. This was the woman who had caused him to suffer countless losses. Even after so many years, she was still as cold and aloof as before, keeping everyone at a distance. However, this was also why Duan Xueqing attracted him. Fat meat that couldn't be eaten was always the most delicious. Every time Liang Zhenglin saw Duan Xueqing, he had the urge to push her down, tear her skirt, and ravage her over and over again. However, he didn't show it. Xueqing, you're here too? Liang Zhenglin walked over and pretended to be calm. Actually, he had already found out that Duan Xueqing would be coming over this time. Hence, he specially made some preparations. Poplar Fruit could smell the cologne on Liang Zhenglin's body from afar. This made him feel a little disgusted. A man who looked a little feminine was wearing cologne. Long time no see. I didn't bring you any gift. Liang Zhenglin said hypocritically. How about this? His hand naturally reached under the table. When he picked it up, A small bouquet of delicate red roses appeared in his hand. Wow! Not sure if he had found someone to cooperate with him secretly, his performance attracted a few cheers. Flower beauties are even more beautiful. Xueqing, this bouquet of flowers is for you, Liang Zhenglin said. His face revealed a charming smile. I don't want it. Duan Xueqing coldly said these 3 words. The originally warm atmosphere quickly turned cold. Zhenglin has good intentions. Xueqing, just accept it. Liang Zhenglin glanced at her. A few girls understood and agreed. You want it, you accept it. Duan Xueqing looked at them expressionlessly. Her eyes emitted a cold light. All right. Xueqing doesn't like flowers. I forgot. Liang Zhenglin was used to being rejected. He didn't mind and said, it's my fault. Next time, I'll bring you something better. Come. These flowers are also for the beautiful ladies. While he was giving the flowers to the girls, Poplar Fruit gave Song Jiwen a look. Song Jiwen understood. He stood up and quietly sat on the other side of Duan Xueqing. I say, today none of you are allowed to toast Xueqing. Xueqing can't drink. If you want to toast, come to me. Liang Zhenglin laughed loudly. He turned around and wanted to sit down on the empty seat beside Duan Xueqing. But when he turned around, he saw Song Jiwen sitting there and smiling at him. You? Liang Zhenglin wanted to question Song Jiwen. Wasn't he sitting on the other side? Why did he come over? But he held it in. They were both hedonistic sons. Song Jiwen wasn't afraid of him. He didn't dare to provoke Song Jiwen. After all, Song Jiwen had a powerful father. You. Seeing Poplar Fruit's face on the other side, Liang Zhenglin bitterly shut his mouth. He didn't plan to try to persuade Poplar Fruit to give up his seat. These few years, he knew that Poplar Fruit often protected Duan Xueqing. Rather than being disgraced, he might as well be smart and not ask. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor, greater than or equaled, that you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.